There were blogs for every single David Tennant body part.
I was a Jesus fangirl for a year.
Who else is going to be going to a Captain America Winter Soldier screening 2 years after that movie came out?
The girls at school love Teen Wolf, but not like how I love Teen Wolf.
They wouldn't sleep outside for Teen Wolf.
They wouldn't sleep outside for Teen Wolf. Fangirl Central. We're all set. Guys, hello.
Hello.
We are back with another episode of Fangirl Central.
Welcome back.
I am Amanda.
I'm Amber.
And
being a fangirl is central to our identity.
I'm so excited about this conversation. And before we get into it, I want to give the listeners some context for you. So we've written a little bit of a bio.
Yes, we want to give a great intro.
So we are here with our guest.
We have Allegra Rosenberg. She is a writer based in New York who has basically built a career off of professionalizing her fandom.
Since her very first internship at BBC America, she has worked in touring and events, bringing bands like Muna to USC's campus for FemFest, been a music manager, been in a band, produced live comedy in Brooklyn and the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and been an editorial researcher for Tumblr.
She is one of the lead organizers of the Terror Camp Virtual Polar Fan Conference, has presented official academic work in fan studies, and is currently writing a book, Fandom Forever and Ever, a nonfiction history of fandom culture.
You can find Allegra's recent writing on her website or at her Substack, and we are so excited to have her in the studio today. Welcome Allegra.
Oh my
Hi,
goodness.
guys. It's so great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Okay, we had to bring you in because me and Allegra went to college together.
Fight on.
Literally the very first time I met you, we were talking about Tumblr, like within like 2 minutes. I don't know how it came up, but we were like on the way to a screening of Captain America: The Winter Soldier on campus.
And that's just like, I think we could sense it. Who else is going to be going to a Captain America Winter Soldier screening 2 years after that movie came out?
Right. Like, also without knowing anybody.
Right.
Like, I don't know. Like, it was just like the first week of school.
Yeah.
It was literally like welcome week.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't know how Tumblr came up, but I was just like, oh, like, this is one of my favorite movies. Like, I've seen it 12 times in theaters. And immediately, you were just like, that's nothing. Like, you were like, that's not.
That's normal.
That's
for
normal.
For a film like that, for poetic cinema like that. And then I think what I'm thinking about it now, I don't remember if I said this, but I probably told you I saw Pacific Rim in theaters that many times.
Yes. You did. Oh my God, I'm remembering.
I don't remember saying that, but it's what I must have said. If you
had to have said it.
I didn't see it 12 times. I saw it 8 times in theaters. And then by the time I hit 8, it left theaters. But then that same group of friends and I went and saw Mad Max in theaters 4 times. So I think 12, it adds up for that era.
It does. Go listen to Allegra's episode of Fansplaining podcast, because that's where they really get into your like complete fandom history and like your fandom origin story, which is not what we're talking about today.
Yes.
Just to give us some context, what are your like biggest fandoms?
Sure. I started off as a literal child, as a huge Harry Potter fan, as many of us did. That was like my first real experience with being obsessed with like a series and like a world like that. And then my next big era, like when I was on Tumblr, when I was like a tween and a teenager, definitely like the two that defined that era for me, like middle school and high school, was Doctor Who and Homestuck. Those are my big ones. That was when I first started to like professionalize my fandom. Like I had a YouTube channel and I released like an album of fandom music and stuff like that in high school. And then when I was in college, like I really only cared about like bands. Like, and I was really interested in like music, and I wasn't really participating in like a fandom so much as I was like directing that fandom energy towards being a part of a music scene here in LA. It was definitely like the same part of my brain, but it was not as much like, I wasn't really on Tumblr at the time. I wasn't part of like a larger community. More recently, like in the middle of the pandemic to now, I guess, I have been really into the show The Terror and polar exploration as a whole. So that has been my latest era.
Wow. So I have a question already. So you said you made an album of fandom songs.
Yeah.
Could you please explain more?
Sure. So I grew up in a very musical home. I have been playing music since I was a kid. My dad is a professional musician. He had a recording studio in the basement.
Oh, wait.
Wow.
That's amazing.
So when I started like just falling in love with like Doctor Who, for example, the one way that I could figure out to express my love and my fandom was to write songs about episodes of Doctor Who.
Oh,
so
my gosh.
my freshman year of high school, this episode called The Doctor's Wife aired, and it was written by Neil Gaiman, who's one of my favorite authors. And I was so inspired by that episode and I had just gotten a ukulele because it was 2014 and we all had ukuleles.
That's absolutely 2014.
And I think I had put up some stuff on my YouTube channel before then, like inspired by like all the ukulele YouTubers at the time. But I wrote this song about Doctor Who and about this episode, and I think I put it up, and somehow Neil Gaiman found it and he tweeted about it.
What?
And this
My
is during
God.
finals week of my freshman year of high school. And I remember like opening my like freaking netbook. Like this is before Chromebooks. This is like my shitty little school laptop. Seeing that he had tweeted about my song and like added me and everything.
Oh my God.
And I was just like, holy shit. And that like changed my life because of course that kind of recognition.
Yeah, it's like, oh.
It makes you want to keep doing that.
Yes,
Oh
you're
my
like, I've
God.
done something, and you did. That's.
Yeah.
That's literally like a fangirl dream.
I'm like, what?
It was absolutely a fangirl dream. I mean, I owe so much to him just like somehow, like, and maybe he got sent it. And then like I wrote more songs about Doctor Who, and I wrote songs about really whatever I was into at the time on the ukulele and then on the guitar. And I busked at Doctor Who conventions on my
Oh my
ukulele
God.
while dressed as Amy Pond in Chicago. And I did the open mic at VidCon one year. So music was really
Yeah.
my main way of expressing myself in fandom. Like I read and write fan fiction now, but I didn't until I was like out of college. Like it was really all about like music and memes and like cosplay and like other kinds of fan expression for me. So, and then I think it was around the time of Doctor Who's 50th anniversary in 2013, BBC and BBC America were doing like these celebrations, and I think Neil Gaiman was at one at the Town Hall in New York. It was this big music venue, and he was there with Amanda Palmer, his wife at the time, and they performed my song
No.
live on stage at the Town Hall in New York. I was not there. I was in Chicago, and they had to like learn it. They didn't know the words, so like Arthur Darvill was holding up the cue cards with the lyrics.
I'm listener, if you cannot see us, me and Amber are just
like mouth agape.
cannot believe this.
Wait, okay, Allegra. If I had not been like, tell us more about. Would you have shared that story? Like, that's insane. I was not ready. I was not ready.
I didn't share that on the Fansplaining podcast because it's just like so bizarre.
That's so
Okay, so wait, because I know we're gonna get into this a little bit more, but you're probably known in the Doctor Who fandom for this song by some people.
Well, I was then. This is like over 10 years
but
ago.
still, you know, like I remember, like sorry to bring One Direction up so early.
Oh, sorry. It was not 2014 that I recorded this Doctor Who. It was 2010. This is my freshman year of high school.
Oh, so you're even more baby.
Yes.
Like you're a little
No.
child.
So I was confusing the years I was a freshman. It was 2010 that I was in high school. And it must have been finals at the spring of 2011, which I think around when that episode came out.
Yes.
Yes. And then the 50th anniversary was in 2013.
Yeah.
And that is when they Neil Gaiman and Amanda Palmer performed that song live.
Whoa.
That's okay. That's incredible because I remember there was a fan who made an animated series of One Direction as superheroes.
I remember that.
Yeah, and it's like just kind of all of the entire fandom knows this person.
I mean, my songs were filmed with my laptop webcam. They were not polished.
It doesn't
by
matter
any
though. That's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
like.
So I got to do, and in between when I put out that first song and then when they did the town hall thing, I got to like write a jingle that was aired on BBC America for for like a Doctor Who promotion, and that was how I got in touch with BBC America and ended up interning for them.
Okay.
Wow.
I was like, it was like early days of like user generated content when they would like ask fans to do stuff for the channel to promote the show.
Right.
And you probably remember this. This was like the 2 years that Doctor Who was huge in America.
Yes.
This
yes,
is when
they
they
were everywhere.
pumping tons of money. BBC America was pumping tons of money into like billboards and like fan activations and premieres and stuff like that. It was like the 2 years leading up to the 50th anniversary. It was,
Yeah.
like 2011 to 2013.
Which is when I got into the
Right.
fandom. Like I literally only got into the fandom because I saw so many GIF sets of Amy, the Doctor, and Rory.
Yeah.
And I was like, who are these fantastical lanky people in a blue box?
Right.
And then I started watching and I was like, wait, I have to go through this bald man with a leather jacket and then Barty Crouch Jr. first, and then Barty Crouch Jr. ended up being my favorite Doctor.
That's the thing. Here's the thing. I was my biggest years of Doctor Who fandom was like 2010 to 2013.
Yes.
But my favorite Doctor is Dave Tennant. Like, because I had to watch all that to catch up.
Exactly.
Because
I feel like we have the same, because there's so many people that just started with Matt Smith. I was like, I can't do that. Like, I have to watch all the episodes.
I mean, I think the girl in my middle school who like told me to start watching Doctor Who was like, oh, no, just start with season 1. So that was good of her.
Start with Rose.
And also because that was when, I think she told me that when Matt Smith's first season hadn't even started yet.
Gotcha.
So this was like 2009, 2010. So yeah, I started, I watched DoctorWhoSeries.com on Mega Video.
Yeah.
Literally, like watch Doctor Who free. Watch Doctor Who free. Watch Doctor Who free.
And then Mega Video, you have watched 72 minutes. Like you have to.
Is Mega Video that one with the green play?
I don't know.
No, I
like
think it was orangish red.
Orange. Okay.
Yeah, and
I know
then
what
they'd
you're
be like,
talking
you've
about.
watched too much today. Like you have to like
fuck you.
You have to like leave for like an hour or like come like trick it to come back.
Yeah, there were ways.
There were ways.
And then I would have to
I'd
have to switch to like the one that would stop and start and then go back to Mega Video.
Anyway, like every so often I'll rewatch some or all of it. I was trying to really like do a full like New Who rewatch before the 60th. That didn't happen.
I did that this year.
I still haven't seen like some of the. I haven't seen like barely any of the Chibnall stuff. I saw most of Capaldi like in bits and pieces.
Yeah, I hopped off with Capaldi after his first season. I
never finished that one, but then I came back and watched the last 2, which were quite good.
I came back, liked it, and then I stopped again when Jodie started. I watched her first, and then I stopped again, and then I rewatched all of it to catch up so that I understood this year because of the 60th. But I only did that because I knew David Tennant was coming back.
I mean, I was like, I assume that Russell T Davies will make it so that I don't need to have watched all of Jodie's.
I really hope so, because that's like one of the critiques of Moffat's era is that like you can't really just jump in at any episode. You have to know what's going on, and there's certain lines that if you miss, like you won't know what's happening.
I watched the 60th not really having watched any of Jodie's stuff, and it was fine.
Yeah, exactly.
It was fine. My days of being super, super active in the fandom and like making friends in the fandom, like that was like early high school for me. So like 2010.
Yeah.
Then I moved over to Homestuck probably like around 2012. And then I released that album. I recorded it in my bedroom on GarageBand in 2012. I think it was called Obsessive, which is the theme of my life. This was around the time, and the title track of that song I had written as a Song of the Month for RookieMagazine.com.
Oh my
Rookie
God.
Mag!
That was my one contribution of Rookie Mag.
Rookie Mag!
You like take the term professional fangirl to like the highest level. Like your resume, I always say everybody just needs to respect fangirls, look at their resumes, it will all be there.
Yeah. Rookie Magazine was a source of great insecurity for me because I grew up in Chicago. Tavi Gevinson grew up in Chicago. I think our birthdays are a week apart in the same year. And she, to me, I don't know how much you know about Tavi Gevinson.
No, let us know.
So
I don't know who that is.
She's the founder of Rookie Magazine.
Oh,
she was like a very influential teen fashion blogger in the 2010s. She started fashion blogging when she was like 11.
Okay.
And then eventually she like got invited to fashion shows and like was kind of this like what's the word? Not ingenue, like a young genius. There's like something.
I think that's an ingenue.
No, but it was like
not prodigy.
Yeah, maybe prodigy.
Okay.
It'll come to me.
Yeah.
Oh, enfant terrible. That's what I was looking for.
Oh,
she was sort
of sounds very like Twilight.
She
was the enfant terrible of the blogosphere, of the fashion blogosphere. And when she was about 14, she founded an online teen girls magazine called Rookie Magazine.
So cool.
She was so cool. She was the pinnacle of coolness to me. And because I girls from my camp went to high school with her. Like she was kind of like who I could be if I was cool and not an uncool fangirl. She made me feel quite insecure about the fact that all of my creative energy, no matter what I did, ended up being directed back at like a franchise or some kind of like commercial property.
Yeah.
Because she was a fashionista and she was original and she was creative and like unique.
So like a little bit of fangirl shame because it's like also all of those adjectives could be applied to you and all of us fangirls.
Right, but I didn't
You
feel
know
that
it
way
yet, exactly.
because Tavi Gevinson presented this kind of specter of coolness that even though I was very productive and people liked my work and like I had a little following of my own, I could not compare to Tavi Gevinson. And it really was just because like she was exactly my age and lived where I lived and, you know, had a similar background that I was like, But
was with the stuff that she was into, was it like, you said she was fashionista.
She was into like Sofia Coppola movies and like The Virgin Suicides and like Comme des Garçons and like she was cool. And like Wilco, like she dated like the guy from Wilco's son because they went to high school together. She liked cool music and cool clothes and cool movies and I liked Doctor Who.
Okay, this is so interesting, and I didn't even write this in my notes because I do want to get to your book, but what is the deal with the different parts of Tumblr? Like when I bring up Tumblr, I feel like most people think that I'm talking about like like aesthetic, like photography, black and white, like cool girl,
shoes by a wall,
Sofia Coppola, like shoes by a wall, like anorexia, Tumblr, and I'm like, I've never been on that side of Tumblr. I don't know what you're talking about. But I feel like what you're describing is kind of that. Sofia Coppola is one of my favorite directors, but I also contain multitudes. Doctor Who is one of my favorite shows.
So what it comes down to is the difference between Tumblr as a culture and Tumblr as a platform. Well, Tumblr as a subculture and Tumblr as a mainstream platform. Because during the years of Tumblr's height, multiple like a lot of diverse demographics of people used it. So like the subcultures that they brought to it sort of ran the gamut of like, you know, anything that you would find on TikTok today you would find on Tumblr, from the you know, pro anorexia like sort of aesthetic Lana Del Rey stuff to the geeky fandom nerdy stuff. So it was, you know, a sort of melting pot. So people who are on Tumblr during its peak have very different experiences of what it was as a platform, although I will say that like the unifying factor of those experiences is a focus on like visuals and aesthetics, because I would say even like the fandom parts of Tumblr had a focus on visuals and aesthetics. Like we talked about gift sets, we talk about like graphics and stuff like that, and collages and stuff like that, as compared to the very literary style of fandom that was dominant when LiveJournal was sort of like the main fandom platform, right? So what Tumblr did was it brought together all these visual and aesthetic subcultures. So yeah, when you bring up Tumblr to someone who wasn't on fandom, they remember it for like the sort of basic properties that all its subcultures shared of like sharing images, sharing aesthetics, and like sort of propagating these, you know, it's the original sort of aesthetic platform.
Absolutely. And it really is.
What it did for fandom was a little different in that it allowed people to participate, to curate as an act of participation. So that is what sets it apart from earlier fandom environments where you kind of had to make something to be part of it. Or lurk.
Really true.
There was I was either one or the other. You were either a lurker or you were a creator. And Tumblr, the sort of like third pillar of fandom is curation, right? And like reblogging and like creating a great space and like, you know, choosing the stuff to feature.
Like reblogging so that your dashboard or your page will be like, this is everything that I like. Like if you just want to do a quick scan.
It's a collector's item.
Exactly. And like a lot of fandom is about collecting. And it's about gathering all of like the paparazzi photos of David Tennant looking really nice. That's why I joined Tumblr in 2010, because I wanted to follow a blog called David Tennant's Eyebrows.tumblr.com. There were blogs for every single David Tennant body part. David Tennant's eyebrows, David Tennant's hair, David Tennant's thighs, like, and I followed all of them.
I'm guilty of doing that for certain people.
I feel so. I don't know how we've known each other this long, and like we had a conversation about Tumblr and didn't talk about David Tennant, because what you mentioned on Fansplaining, he's also the reason I came back to fandom on Good Omens.
Yeah, me too.
Like I had been away from fandom. I was literally away from Tumblr the same exact years as you because it was college. And I was trying to be normal in air quotes with my peers. And I was like, yeah, I love all that stuff, and I loved it in high school. I watched Good Omens because I had read the book literally like a whim. Like I was like, oh, like everybody says I should read Neil Gaiman, and I have never read a Neil Gaiman book, so I'll just pick Good Omens. And then I remember the day that David Tennant got cast as Crowley, and I was like,
here we go.
Okay, it's not out yet. They're not even filming, but everyone, I sent out like a quiet radar in my brain. I was like, whenever that airs, I'm going to be activated. I'm going to be activated.
I was and here's the thing, it's like I was actually in the Good Omens book fandom for a brief period of time on Tumblr. And
what years was
that
that?
was like 2011, I think. I mean,
That's
the
so
book came out in the
niche.
90s, but
Yeah.
it's been one of my favorite books because I love Neil Gaiman. It's been one of my favorite books for a long time. I remember one summer I went to like arts camp and I took a bookbinding class and I made a Good Omens themed like notebook like in 2011.
That.
And then I was excited for the TV show, like a little nervous, like I wasn't, wasn't sure, without Terry Pratchett, how's it going to be?
Right.
But that was at a time, like I said on the other podcast, where I was just so bored. It was like post-college. I was starting to experience adult ennui at my office job.
Yeah.
Me too.
Just the fangirl lull all around.
And I needed that little something. And what Good Omens did for me that I think it was really the first show to ever do this was to turn fan fiction writing and reading into my main form of participation. I wrote some songs. I actually wrote songs for fics that I wrote. Like I tried to combine the two. But I had reached a point where like a lot of my friends that I had made in that fandom when the show came out were writers. And I wanted to show them that I could do it too.
Yeah.
And it was also that those first couple months of that first season, oh my God, the fics would just blow up.
Yeah.
Like you'd write something and it would get like dozens of thousands of hits. Like it was crazy.
Everybody's looking for the content.
No, exactly. So like I was very inspired by the show. Very inspired by and that's one thing that like after the second season, which I thought was fine, but I wasn't inspired to create after it because you could tell where it was going to go in the third season.
Yeah.
Whereas the first season, we didn't know if we were going to get a second season. We didn't know what would happen next.
So everybody needed the fix it.
The will they, won't they, the fix it, the backstory, there was so much room to play around in after that series.
But
so
that first
season was just like, oh, like I can write.
That's
I'm
really
a writer.
That's so interesting. What was it like writing? Like, what was your process like writing it for the first time ever?
Well, I had written fic before. Like, I had just dabbled.
Okay.
I did NaNoWriMo for a while when I was like, I always wrote.
Okay.
I always enjoyed it. But I was just, the continuous inspiration had never been there until Good Omens. And part of that was the feedback. Part of that was dropping a fic and getting dozens of comments right away because everybody wants more of these guys.
Yeah.
And so I was immediately included in a community. The same way that when I had been doing songs, I would get feedback from a community.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
Like the fic that I had written before was for like shit nobody cared about. Or like it was not like really shippy. Like there was like it was just like, oh, like what if this crazy crossover happened?
Okay.
With Good Omens, it was like, no, I'm writing like they're gonna kiss, and that's what everybody wants.
Yeah, it is. Okay, I feel like we were talking about it on a different episode how fanfics are mostly like surrounded around the ships, or when fandoms start to communicate with each other, it's mostly because of shipping. And so if you don't really have a ship that you have allegiance to. It's like less conversation, or you feel like you have less conversation in some of the fandom communities and dashboards.
Yeah, I mean, I think shipping is one of the most social fandom practices, especially because people can get really antagonistic about it, and fans love to fight. Like,
they do.
The origin of the word shipping, right?
I feel like I do. It's battleship?
No.
Please tell
okay.
us.
Yeah, tell us. Me trying to guess.
Using the phrase shipping to refer to wanting two characters, to imagine two characters together, that practice had been going on before the phrase was created.
Right.
Like the first / ship was Kirk and Spock, or Holmes and Watson, if you want to really get into it. But
two of my best ones.
Well, they're the same.
My favorite ones.
The phrase shipping actually came as a shortening of the phrase relationshipping.
Okay.
Which comes from X-Files fandom to refer to the relationshippers were the ones who wanted Mulder and Scully to get together, and the no-romos were the ones that didn't want them to get together. And that was shortened to shippers and no-romos. And eventually, shippers became a word to refer to anybody who wanted any pairing to get together and not just Mulder and Scully.
Okay. Now, see,
this was in the 90s.
I did know the relationship, that part. I do remember reading that it came from that word, but I did not know the backstory of like a specific TV show.
So, I remember randomly and then forgetting because there was like an AO3, the bracket that just happened, and like Kirk and Spock won, which rightfully so. But Mulder and Scully were like really, really close.
Also rightfully so.
Yeah.
Because our vocabulary to describe what it is that we do when we want two characters to get together comes from Mulder and Scully.
Yeah.
And I think that like that was one of the biggest fandoms of the 90s, and one that's remembered today. There were a lot of other big fandoms in the 90s that are not as well remembered.
Yeah.
A big one was Beauty and the Beast. Have you ever heard of this show?
What?
No.
In the 90s?
In the 90s, and it was about like, oh my god, I like just looked up the summary and then I completely forgot about it. I'm totally gonna butcher this, but there's like a guy who lives in the sewers and he kidnaps a lady, and it's like this whole like crazy anyway.
Like a modern retelling of Beauty and the Beast.
Okay.
And people loved that show.
Oh my god.
Sounds
And there was
90s.
a really big like transformative fandom around it in the 90s that's like pretty much forgotten today. Possibly because the show doesn't hold up. I don't know. I don't know that much about it.
Might be dated.
That's really interesting. It's just interesting that the community that you can find around fandom versus like how it feels to lurk. Like, because I've lurked a lot.
yeah.
I've been a lurker in a lot of fandoms, like not an active participant, to the point where I'm like, well, I don't know anybody that likes this, but I'm observing a lot of people that like this.
Right.
And creating something in a fandom does immediately create community. I feel like it's like a shortcut for like honestly introverts like me who like don't want to just like start up a conversation with somebody just on the basis that we like the same thing. Because like starting this podcast has made people come up to me and be like, I love your podcast, but also I love X, Y, and Z in this fandom. And then we start to talk.
Yeah.
And it's like kind of a shortcut for me to be in community or like wearing cosplay, like showing up in cosplay and everyone coming up and being like, I love your cosplay.
Yeah.
Like it immediately places you into the community.
I mean, and this is another thing like that Tumblr was really good at is like you could immediately be placed into a community because the content that you were making was your curation. And it was just like that slow step up of like, I'm going to follow you because you post stuff that I like. It's not even stuff that you made.
Right.
Yeah.
You just collect it very well.
Yeah.
And I would follow people whose tags I liked.
Exactly.
We like communicate with each other just during just through the crazy tags.
Yeah, the tags were also so nice because it organized everything. Like if you just wanted to go for a trip down memory lane of specifically, I'm going to use One Direction, like specifically like when Niall and Harry were in the press tours together. Like you would have the Nary tag that you could just go to and scroll through all the gifs, and it's like very organized. I love those.
I had my laughing tag.
Yeah. Yeah, the funny ones, the ones that like make you scream and cry.
And literally when I would be upset or like depressed, I would just go through my laughing tag and be like, this is just so amazing.
I mean, curation is so powerful. And I think that like, you know, becoming like involved in like a fic community, sometimes I like miss that purely curatorial aspect because it's like, oh, I'm like now the way that I participate is through writing stuff, and now I'm like, oh, but I miss the days when I could just reblog.
Yeah.
I've like put myself into a position where I'm like, I don't feel, and it's terrible to have to, you know, to want to feel productive in a fandom because that's not really the point, but also like people's brains are weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like this could honestly be a bridge into fan history, but I feel like in the past, like before Tumblr, people would wear T-shirts or like put stickers on their bottles, and that was kind of like an identifier if you saw someone that had the same T-shirt of a band you liked or like the same sticker on. Well, they didn't have hydro flasks, but
water bottles.
You know, like
laptops,
patches. Oh, they would sew on. They had those patches they would sew on. Like that would be kind of the way. Be like, oh, you like this band, and then you go into that conversation that way.
Yeah. I mean, like, subcultural affiliation is an interesting question because I think it's only recently that fandom has become a subculture that people are willing to, like, literally wear on their sleeve.
Yeah.
And, like,
it used to be so shameful.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I had, like, my other car is a TARDIS bumper sticker when I got my first car.
My first car had this car is a Horcrux bumper sticker. I took it off because I don't like J.K. Rowling, obviously, and I don't want to just, like, say that to the world. But it did have this car is a Horcrux, and it had a Deathly Hallows bumper sticker on it.
I mean, and I think that, like, you know, back in the day when fandom, or media fandom especially, was a much smaller subculture, it's interesting to read about, like, how people found each other. Because it was so much harder. And most of it was either being done through the mail or in person. Those were really your only two options. Or a lot of people just did it on their own and had no idea that other people were doing it. And that is one of the things that points to fandom, is this, not like this universal thing, but like something that can, you know, it's an emergent property of emotion. People will feel called to start writing about, you know, Kirk and Spock sucking face, and they don't know why. They don't know that anybody else is doing it. And then they might happen to meet someone who's like, oh, no, don't worry, there's more of us.
You're this intense too? Yeah,
yes.
absolutely.
It will just it will spring up, you know?
Yeah.
It's like this mutation almost.
Yeah.
But I also don't think it is a mutation. I think it's incredibly natural.
Yeah.
And I think it's only like this, you know, the internet and this modern condition that has let people to very like naturally follow those feelings to where they lead and towards community instead of feeling isolated by these strong emotions brought about by media.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Which is why, like, I feel like that exact experience is like directly parallel to like the queer experience or any sort of like marginalized group. Like, if you feel like an outcast from society in any way, like pirate syndrome, like you wish you could just like not fit into society's rigid structures, like, which is why I feel like fandom is so queer and so like punk, like, and so like just counterculture. Which is why I love it.
Yeah.
It's a complicated sort of thing to just declare, because like fandom does in many ways take pride in being counterculture, but also it wouldn't exist without culture. It's about culture, and frequently and most often commercial culture and capitalist culture at that. So what's so interesting about fandom, and especially modern fandom to me, is the way that it's like, I hate to use this word, but there's a dialectic there, right?
Yeah.
There's this tension between the part of fandom that is a rebellion, that is like anti-capitalist, that is like anti-commercial, like we're going to take this and we're going to own it instead of you. And then there's the plain fact that without commercial culture, fandom would not exist. It would have nothing to sort of revolve around.
Exactly.
And this is something that I'm always grappling with. This is something that I think a lot of fans are grappling with, if not always necessarily consciously.
Yeah.
Because like, you know, how do we as outcasts, as queer people, as, you know, subordinated formations of culture, as one fandom scholar put it, make peace with the fact that we are engaging with the products of this capitalist economy, and that's what gives us pleasure and joy.
Right. I mean,
yeah, that's very real.
I feel like it's like talking about the commodification of art and like at its root, like we are like I see a lot of people now online being like, I get another hobby other than media consumption, and I'm like, okay, like in this world where all media has now become content, maybe it would be unhealthy if we were like just scrolling on TikTok all day and like just consuming content and media and consumption. But it's like media consumption is also like binging a TV show, which I consider art, like TV shows and film and music and all of these different sorts of like art forms. And like we are consuming that, but like that is my hobby. Like I would rather watch film. I would rather sit in my house and watch like 4 films than play a basketball game. But I also like love to dance. It's not like one or the other. And I feel like there's this like, I don't know, I'm always grappling with like, oh, like the like looking down on media consumption and looking down on fandom as like people who just like eat up whatever like the capitalist like Marvel gives us versus like, actually, but I like art, and also like the stuff that fans create outside of the original media is like just as legitimate form of art form as the original thing, and that kind of like becomes its own thing.
Yeah. This is the sort of stuff that the early fan scholars were interested in. And I think it was Henry Jenkins who, in the late 1980s, was the first person to say, or one of the first people to say, people who are sitting on the couch watching TV are not passive. There is an active element to watching, especially with people who then take what they watch and discuss it afterwards and contemplate it and transform it and incorporate it into their lives as he was observing fans doing, right? And so he called them textual poachers. And he took the phrase textual poaching from a literary theorist named Michel de Certeau. And he used the phrase textual poaching in the context of fandom to refer to the way that people who, while from, you know, an external point of view might be perceived as couch potatoes, might be perceived as passive consumers, were actually performing and working upon the culture that they were being given in a way that went above and beyond sort of consumerist passivity. So these are ideas that have been present in fandom studies, you know, since fandom studies was a thing, and that are being, you know, sort of deconstructed and reconstructed in different ways. And some people don't agree, and some people, you know, build upon that, whatever. But that is like a real sort of central pillar of the people who study, you know, fans academically. Like, there is something worthwhile in what people are doing when they watch, when they listen, when they read.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was just saying the other day that all stories, all movies, TV shows, music, they were based on a version of a story. It didn't just poof out of thin air. Even like the most fantastical thing you could think of is going to be related to something in the world somehow. And so to just have some type of art that you connect to and are able to apply to like real life that maybe you don't experience, but you know about it, or maybe you do directly experience it. It's just a way to communicate with others.
Yeah, that tweet about like, get a hobby aside from media consumption. I see like where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And I do feel, concern at what I perceive as like the passivity of the feed and the algorithm and the way that it encourages consumption without curation.
Yeah.
And this is something that was dealt with in a really good recent book called Filter World by Kyle Chayka. And he talks about the way in which algorithms are taking away agency from people to being able to choose what they like. And because the act of building your own taste and figuring out what means something to you and why it means something to you and how to find more of that something to make your life meaningful and surround yourself with meaningful art is what is being taken away when we encounter like the Netflix algorithm or the TikTok algorithm or stuff like that. So that is where this idea of media consumption as a danger sort of does ring true for me.
Yeah.
Because like, how did I find Doctor Who? A girl at school told me about it and then I had to go track it down and pirate it so that I could watch it and so that I could change my life. How are people discovering the stuff that resonate with them today? Are they just waiting for it to sort of come up in the algorithm?
Exactly.
What if they might wait forever?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's also it's also on the other hand of it where it's like Marvel has become this thing where they have fans that will like anything just because the name Marvel is on it. And it's like, did that film speak to you?
Right.
Was it good? Or is it Marvel? And you're just so like you just have subscribed to the hype of Marvel. Like it is exciting to subscribe to the hype.
Right.
But sometimes you have to take a step back. Do you like it because it's Marvel or is it good? Does it speak to you?
Right.
Because you were saying like with Doctor Who, someone told you about it, then you had to go track it down. And so when you track it down, you watch it and you're like, is this worth now continuing the effort?
Yeah.
And it is very much so.
Obviously.
No question.
If I see something on the homepage of my algorithm and I hit I click it and I don't like the first 20 minutes, I might click out. But if I have thousands and thousands of GIF sets and photos on my Tumblr, plus 4 of my close friends telling me to watch something, if I don't like the first episode, if I don't like the first 4 episodes, I'm going to keep going.
Right.
And I'm going to try to get to season 5.
Like, what are they talking about?
Because there's something like, it's like if like the reason I started watching The Terror, which is like the most recent show to completely change my life, is because friends of mine from the Good Omens fandom were blogging about it on Tumblr. And I was like, just sort of feeling a call to it. So I had to like, go watch it. And I was like, this isn't my usual fare at all.
Yeah.
But people that I trust really like it. And I want to be a part of the community with them around this show. I want to follow. Like, that's one of the amazing things about fandoms is, like, you might be friends with someone in a fandom and then completely lose track of them for 5, 6, 10 years and then come join a new fandom and they're there. And you're like, oh, my God, it's you. I'm so happy to be here with you. And it's like no time has passed at all. And you're, like, back in the jam together. And, like, of course I have friends who, like, now we're friends outside of fandom and, like, that's not really a part of it. That's just how we met. But I have other people who I'm like, oh man, I miss that person from that fandom. I hope we end up in one again. Like that would be really nice. And it's just like those reunions are always really great. This latest fandom I'm in, like I met up with like a bunch of people like from past fandoms, and it was like a real coming together. And I'm like, all you guys have great taste.
Exactly. Like if we liked this one thing, I'm so happy that we like have another point.
Exactly. So like there is like what fandom I think really helps you do in a world where it's increasingly sort of about the algorithm and about like really passive media consumption, like not even what Henry Jenkins was talking about, because then you still have to like turn on the fucking TV, but really like the increasing passive algorithmic consumption. What fandom does is it encourages alternative ways of curating your own taste based on the people around you and stuff like your favorite tropes and like actual things that you know that you like, because you have a relationship, you have a knowledge of your own pleasure when you're a fan. You can recognize the what is called like sort of the aff factor, like the emotion within you that means that you're about to really, really get into something. And what I find when I'm talking to people who aren't really in fans or haven't been in fandom since they were a kid, is like they don't remember what that feels like.
No.
And it's like foreign. Yes, that's so true.
And I'm like, first of all, how do you live like that? Second of all, what I want to do is help people find that again.
Yeah.
Too.
Because it's just like I have to feel like they're missing out.
They
Yeah.
are. It's a
That's
joy.
That's why people drink, and that's why people
Yes.
exercise too much, and that's why people, get obsessed with like,
The
I don't know.
fangirling
chasing
is
a
our
high.
own
Yeah.
endorphin.
Well,
You know,
they're not even chasing a high. It's like I feel like fans are lucky in that what fandom is play, right? At the end of the day, it's play. And people who don't have play in their lives tend to be sad and feel like they're missing something. And, people can rediscover play through a lot of ways other than fandom, through athletics and through crafts and stuff like that. But fandom is this way to access that childish feeling of imagination and of play and, in community too.
Yeah.
Like with friends. And there's that social aspect of it that enhances it. And when I'll see someone on TikTok, I'm like, girl, you need to get to fandom.
No,
Yeah.
seriously. Like, literally serious. I'm like, you don't remember the joy and it's just utter sheer joy of like screaming in an audience
It's
with other
euphoric.
people. It's euphoric. It's literally
Yeah.
I mean,
euphoria.
it's a religion, and it's like I also sometimes get TikToks of people being like, "Oh, I used to be in One Direction fandom, and that was so great, and I miss it." I'm like, "Girl, you could
it's
find
like
a
a
fandom."
Yeah, it's like
Also,
a
like-
lifetime situation
Also,
here.
like we're still here. Like the One
Yeah.
Direction fandom is still
Like
and
I know what they mean.
Yes, I know what they mean, and I was kind of feeling that in those years, in the like 2014 to 18. I was kind of feeling like, well, I guess I'll never like really get into a fandom the way that I like got into Doctor Who, the way that I got into like One Direction. Like I won't like lose myself like that again. I guess adulthood is here and it won't happen again. And then it's like, haha, bitch, Good Omens, back to back with Our Flag Means Death,
Yeah.
and then David Tennant comes back to Doctor Who, and
Yeah.
I'm losing my mind. I start this
Right.
podcast.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Like-
it's possible. And I think of course there is that inherent resistance. Like someone might miss that feeling, but they also are scared of it because there still is that societal implication of like shame and childishness and stuff
Yes.
like that. They're like, well, if I get back into this, I'm not like a real adult, like, oh, like I have a career, I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, girl, you can.
You can.
And it will make your life better if that's what you feel like you're missing.
Yeah.
Even if it's like as simple as like playing what you played in the car as a teenager in
Yeah.
your room while you're getting ready.
Right.
Like it doesn't really, because there's so much music and there's so much streaming now, it doesn't really occur to me to put on Hannah Montana all the time. But when I do put on Hannah Montana or I do put on One Direction for some ungodly reason,
Yeah.
it literally like fills up my entire body with
Yeah.
joy.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's me. Like, man, I'm in my like fourth Beatles phase. I do it like every 4 years, and I'm just all I'm doing all day this week is like listening to the Beatles. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my god, I fucking
'Cause
love
you
them.
can't. Who's telling you not
You can
to?
literally just put on, your favorite band.
Turn it all the way up in your car. I
Yeah.
just blasted all 5 One Direction albums like like a week in December. I was like, I'm only listening to One Direction when I'm in the car, and it was
Yeah.
like I had it all the way. It was
And
amazing.
I
Yeah.
did that too.
I also
All
feel
five.
like I run into people in some of my fandoms for whom this is the first time that they've gotten involved in a fandom and they're in their 30s or 40s.
Okay.
Wow.
And I
Happy
find
for
that
them.
really interesting. That really only happens, I think, for me, like in small fandoms.
Yeah.
Or like I feel like I saw like some Our Flag Means Death people.
Yes,
where, like,
I was gonna
this is like the
say.
moms, and like this is their first time, like
Yeah.
really getting into it. I always think that's so wonderful.
Me too.
I always think like it's never too late.
No.
And people find so much joy in these communities, especially, and they can learn new skills. They can. I know I have people who like I've encouraged them to write fic for the first time, and they've posted it, and they felt really good about
Wow.
it.
Yeah.
They've gone to fan meetups for the first time, and it's just like on the one hand, it like is a hobby just like any hobby, which has the opportunity to bring you joy or stress or whatever. But fandom in particular is like because there is that relationality to commercial culture. It's so accessible. Like I
Yeah.
really think that there's something out there for everybody.
Yeah. No,
I think so too.
literally, because there's so many different genres of fandom because there's so many different types of media and
Yeah.
there's so many different types of art, but also within that there's so many different genres within those. So like
Totally.
even if you don't like fantasy sci-fi, which is like most of like media fandom, like you can be obsessed with New Girl. Like
Right.
I was obsessed with
Yeah.
New Girl, and I can quote that like the back of my hand, but I feel like people wouldn't consider that a fandom.
Well, this is an interesting sort of semantic question that I feel like comes up a lot because the word fandom is used to refer to a lot of things. It's like, would you consider the people that are obsessed with like Real Housewives and spend all day on like the Real Housewives Reddit, like talking about the drama of that show, like a fandom?
The way that they act, I would consider them a fan. The way that they act and the amount of podcasts that have been
Right.
generated.
But it's a very separate world from media fandom as
Yeah.
we know it. So like what is I'm always interested in like the taxonomy. It's like where and how do we break it down, because like the experiences of that person, like the Real Housewives fan, which like obviously the network is trying to they're trying to make it people as obsessed about it as possible.
Yeah.
What is the emotional universe of that fan look like compared to the emotional and social universe of someone who's like, say, into Doctor Who? Do they get as much pure joy from it, or is it a more analytical and social experience without as much of the active euphoria as like a media fan or like a band fan, right?
I feel like
That's a good question.
Because there's a ton of reality TV fans, but I'm like, I don't know like what that looks like from the inside.
I feel like there's different people. Like there's different. The two people that they both exist within reality TV fandom, especially the Bravo TV, because there's the people that it just brings them joy. That's why they do it. They love it.
Yeah.
And then there's the people that really like to analyze it, like maybe even want to like be on Watch What Happens Live, like want to be on those podcasts, maybe want to make their own podcast. But what I will say is that fandom in general, and I feel like celebrity adjacent fandoms in general, look down on the active fandom more so than like say a Doctor Who fan.
Yeah.
Like I feel like they don't want to associate with like being a fan, like being a crazy fan.
Yeah.
Like they consider themselves a committed viewer. Or
Right.
Right. Like I'm sitting down to watch myself.
Or like I'm obsessed with that, but like I hate that I'm obsessed with that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I think that one thing like the media fandom that's descended from the kind of OGs has is like a pride and like a self-acceptance of like this is what we love to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it brings me joy. I love it.
Whereas like the large and active communities around more like mainstream stuff, like reality TV is the one that jumps out to me, maybe don't want to consider themselves anything out of the normal.
Yeah, I mean, and even that can happen with fandoms that used to not be like that. Things like Harry Potter used to be for nerds, like real nerds, and then it turned into like the most normal girl in the grade being like, I'm kind of a nerd. I love Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And that's now what Marvel is. It's like, I'm kind of a nerd. I actually have seen every Marvel movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, everyone has seen that. It's not weird anymore.
Yeah, this is sort of, it's like the hedonic treadmill, but with like fandom normativity, right? Like it'll reach like a plateau and then, okay, well, what's the next thing that's going to become like a normie thing to be a fan of?
Yeah.
Definitely nothing I'm into.
Which, okay, that's even interesting because I feel like there are normies who will claim the word fangirl or being so big in this fandom, but it's very surface level. And it's like they don't even fathom what the actual definition of being like that hardcore of a fan would be. Like maybe they've seen the show once.
Yeah.
And or there are people that are that like intense, but only are friends with normies. Like only are friends with people that would look down on that, so they hide it.
Right.
They hide how intense it actually is, because I feel like there are probably a lot of people like that in the One Direction fandom, because it is like socially acceptable as a girl, as like a straight girl in the 2010s to like One Direction or like to like Vampire Diaries or Teen Wolf
or Twilight.
Like
I love One Direction, but it's like
and I love all those things except for Vampire Diaries, which I haven't seen, but our mom loves. But I was crazy about them. Like I waited for Teen Wolf starting at 3 a.m. at Comic-Con. But it's like I wouldn't, like the girls at school love Teen Wolf, but not like how I love Teen Wolf.
They wouldn't sleep outside for Teen Wolf.
They wouldn't sleep outside for Teen Wolf.
Well, I don't know. I think that, you know, it's just like with other labels where like letting the broadest number of people use it is probably a good thing. For like acceptance in general.
Yeah, I'm not gatekeeping the term. It's just like
I know.
On a conversation, it's like, oh, we're on different levels.
Right. And it's like a relatability thing. It's like when I say like I am a fandom expert, some people go like, oh, like I'm a fan of blah blah blah. Like I'm at a party and I'm like, well, you're about to get an earful from me, so I hope that you're ready. I'm gonna start saying shit like dialectic of fandom at you. Like you don't even know what you're getting into. Also, what I like to do at parties is tell people like I study and write fandom erotica because I'm in New York, of course, so people will say shit like that at parties. And they'll be like, who has like the weirder job?
Yeah,
because everyone's like, oh my god, that's so cool. Tell me about it. Because they're like, I get the sense they're like, oh, I wish I could have that as a job. But like, of course, like I don't really do that as a job. It is, you know, I do know a lot about it. Like I do study it.
Yeah.
But it's like I don't know how well that would fly in LA. But like that's definitely like party conversation they're in New York. They're like, oh, yeah, like, what are you researching? I'm like, oh, I'm just on a podcast talking about like, like pornography about Doctor Who. And they're like,
I'm like, okay.
it is
That's great.
weird. Like, I mean, there are certainly spaces in LA where that would be seen as cool.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's like the ones which I feel like the worlds that we're talking about, which because we come from like all girls, predominantly white,
yeah,
Southern, which is maybe the most normie sub demographic.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to, they're not normal.
Right.
They're not normal. Everybody's weird, but they're trying really hard to like
Fit into the norm.
Yeah. Even though we've known you since you were 3, we know you're bonkers.
Yeah.
Like those are the types of people you'll find in LA where it's like, I don't know, when the Jonas Brothers came back, people were like, I'm so excited. Like I haven't listened to them in years. Like and they're like, which one is this? Is this Nick? And I'm like, you don't want to get into this conversation with me.
Yes.
Like, I'm sorry, but we'll be here all day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, it will turn weird. And then you will think that I am just such a weirdo, you know? Like,
I've put myself in a good position back in New York where I was like, I was at a party a couple months ago, and I don't remember what I was talking about, but the girl who I was talking to, we rapidly both came to the conclusion that we'd both been into Homestuck at the same time. We had a great conversation.
I love that.
Homestuck is one of those things where like, it was probably the most gender equal fandom I've ever been in.
wow.
And it was like, everybody was on, because it started on Something Awful, which is like obviously like a majority like straight guys sort of website.
Okay.
And so when Homestuck started getting popular on Tumblr, and that's where the conversation was happening, all the guys just came over there. And like, so there was like a really interesting sort of like group of like dude bros and like Tumblr girlies, gender neutral, on the same platform discussing the same franchise.
Right.
And it was super, I know that like I think the only thing comparable would be like video game fandoms, but I think even today those tend to like segregate onto like Reddit versus Tumblr and
Do you,
stuff
you
like
don't
that.
you don't think
Yeah.
like Harry Potter has become pretty gender
I mean, like, I
equal?
think it has, but Homestuck was very specifically, like, while the series was ongoing, everybody was on Tumblr talking about it from, like, the Tumblr-y folks to, like, the Something Awful folks.
Got you.
And everyone was, like, collaborating, too.
Yeah.
On, like, fan adventures and animations and voice acting. And it was, like, have not before or since experienced a fandom quite like that. And also, it was in real life, too, like, at conventions and stuff like that. It was, like, a very diverse crowd, which is super interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Homestuck has had, like, such a broad appeal.
Yeah.
That's super interesting because this kind of relates to what you were saying with the algorithm stuff, but like being able to find what you like because of the people around you and just like your interests.
Yeah.
You can do that to a certain extent online, which is what I did, but like we didn't really have access to it in person, like in-person communities.
Yeah.
And I feel like I was listening to some other podcast and somebody was like, without the internet being queer, like I feel like I wouldn't like have any friends if I was born in like the 80s. And then someone was like, no, you would just find the punk scene in your city and like go to a bunch of music shows. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, the internet opened up the world for me, but I feel like it left me short-sighted into what I could have done in my own city.
Yeah, I mean, that is the purpose of subculture, right?
Yeah.
It's to find the people that you resonate with outside of the mainstream. And in-person urban subcultures obviously have been like a huge force in American life for 100 years. So with fandom, I'm very interested by in-person fandom subcultures. I spent all of my high school years going to anime conventions in Chicago and Doctor Who conventions as well and Comic-Cons and stuff like that. And like that was my thing that I like to do.
Yeah.
And like to be honest, did I need to? Like, did everyone at high school hate me as much as I thought they did? Absolutely not. I could have had friends. I was just a little delulu. And I really enjoyed dressing up. I really enjoyed participating in these subcultures. I am so grateful for that. Like, that is where I made, a lot of, like, that's kind of where I learned how to be the person that I wanted to be.
Oh, my gosh.
Where I got drunk for the first time on Mike's Hard Lemonade at, like, the Anime Central hotel room.
Oh my God.
Like,
yeah, we like
That's
Comic-Con.
a real way to put it. Yeah, because
we went to Comic-Con, but it was like my final summer. It was like my summer before my senior year. And I was like so transformed by the experience. I'd never done anything like that before other than like waiting in line for a concert that I wrote my college essay about it. The prompt was, what's your favorite place on the Common app? And I said Comic-Con. It only happens like once a year, but it's my favorite place in the world. Like I've never been anywhere like it. Yes, we didn't obviously had Comic-Con in Memphis because it's like a smaller city, but I wonder if we had gone to any like local music shows in Midtown or like local like.
We did have a Memphis Comic-Con. I remember Tom Kenny came once.
Yeah, and we couldn't go because I was in Into the Woods.
Yeah, it was post our.
Oh my God,
San
I
Diego
remember
Comic-Con.
one year I was prop master for Henry V, and I made someone else do it on the Saturday of the con. I was like, this is booked out months in advance. I got this gig, but someone else is going to have to do it on this day.
Fair.
That's important.
Completely fair.
I had to go beat Terezi.
Speaking of like people communing, let's talk about your book. Let's talk your book and the
Let's get
history.
into it.
Like because you say, because we've been talking about a lot about modern fandom, and you said to us like there's been a lot written about modern fandom and like LiveJournal, Tumblr and stuff, but you're really looking at things up until the year 2000.
Roundabouts. Like I might get right up into like the early LiveJournal years. But yeah, I mean, I'm interested in what I call the prehistory of fandom. And like I was saying earlier, like it will just sort of emerge. Like people will just feel the urge to do something for or about like a piece of art or medium that moved them.
Yeah.
And that's inspiration at its most basic level, but I'm really interested in how that manifested throughout mostly the 19th and 20th centuries, just because that's like when mass culture starts to emerge as a thing to do stuff around in the first place.
Yeah.
Like you can't really have recognizable fandom like without like the culture to have it around.
Yeah.
And although I do spend my first chapter talking about like some interesting like medieval and early modern characters who like I imagine would be fangirls if they were alive today.
Oh. like who?
There was a medieval Christian mystic named Marjorie Kemp who was like just kind of off her rocker a little bit, but she was the author of the first English language autobiography, and written by a woman, but the first ever English language autobiography was written by her. And it was, like a devotional thing. It was very much like about her journey in religion, but she also like was very proudly just like would make scenes. Like she would scream and cry and weep and flail in churches, and people would just be like, "What the fuck is wrong with you, girl?" She's like, "I literally love Jesus
Sounds
so
like
much."
a fangirl.
Exactly.
I
was a Jesus fangirl for a year.
She did interesting things with gender. Like she refused after a while to perform the duty of being a wife, and she decided to dress in white like a virgin, and she wanted to preach even though that was illegal for women at the time, and like she did all these sort of like non-normative things that reflected her enthusiasm. And I read this very inspirational PhD thesis by a professor named Anna Wilson, who I was lucky enough to speak to for the book, where she talks about how Marjorie Kemp's like practices of religion resemble self-insert fanfiction and Mary Sue fanfiction. And that blew my mind.
Wow.
She would imagine herself, she would picture herself like in the life of Jesus, like, helping him as he died and stuff like that. Like it's like this Mary Sue thing. Which was like not unique to her, but she did it in a way that very much stood out.
That
I talk
resembles fanfiction.
Yeah, I talk about that a little bit, and then I talk about this other woman named Margaret Cavendish, who was in the 17th century. There was a great article about her in the New Yorker recently. I can't summarize it, but she was also like unusual for her time in the way that she approached imagination.
Yeah.
And she was also a prolific writer. So I'm really looking at like creativity, and that first chapter is like mainly about like I'm like halfway into this book, and I still don't know how much of it is like about gender, but it kind of has to be, right?
Yeah.
Because the practices of fanboys and fangirls have been very divergent throughout the last 2 centuries and are only now starting to come together.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have, those women that I just talked about. You have Byron's fangirls around the turn of the 19th century who would like send him locks of hair and be like, I'm in literal love with you. Like, I can tell from your poetry that you're also in love with me. Like the Delulu was real.
Oh my gosh, it goes back for ages.
It goes back. but then you have in the 1830s and 40s, like the rowdy fanboys of the New York theater scene who would like throw shit at the stage and riot if an actor they didn't like came on, right?
Oh my God. I mean, that sounds like sports fans.
That's how they got the tomato. Is that where the tomato throwing came from?
Yeah. So you have like this rowdy subculture in like Lower Manhattan, New York, of like, you know, lower class men who loved Shakespeare, and like if they felt Shakespeare was being interpreted wrong on stage, they would like literally start a riot.
Dang.
And then you have the Wagner fangirls who would like pilgrimage to Germany to see the new Wagner opera and who were like obsessed with everything that he did. And then you have I just finished writing a chapter on these young boys in the 1870s, 1880s who bought toy printing presses and produced their own newspapers. And they started these clubs called amateur press associations. So they weren't fanboys, but they were adolescent amateurs who were creating a subculture of literary production that in many ways was the forerunner of science fiction zines of the interwar years in the 20th century.
Wow. I feel like what fandom does, like dated back to the, it kind of opens a person's eyes to what passion is. Like it shows them what that definition means. Like it's kind of like, I don't know, it's a little bit of an awakening. Like to start writing fanfic is just introducing yourself to the idea that you can creative write and you do have talent or something is a good release for you. Like whether it's writing or I don't even know, like
screaming,
painting, screaming,
writing songs,
dancing. It just kind of throws the pathway of like whatever your release is.
It is very religious and spiritual.
Yeah.
Like literally it does feel like that meme where it's like I thought I was religious, but I actually just like listening to music with huge crowds.
Christians are that's the fandom.
Yeah.
Yes, they're called Christians.
So one of the trickiest things about this book is like, well, how do I discern from the history of enthusiasm, passion, intertextuality, inspiration, all these things that make up fandom? How do I pull all of that apart and find the stuff that, and the answer is like, I just can pick and choose what I want because I'm writing the fucking book.
Exactly.
So if something feels like fandom to me, it's going in the book. This isn't a textbook. This is just me saying what I think.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like that's the great thing about writing, like, you know, like a pop history book is like I really could just be like, okay, well, I say this is this, so you know, here's my sources.
Yeah.
So in my case, like, you know, it's a little bit eclectic. Like I'm really not talking about sports because I don't know that much about sports, and also sports fandom history. Even though that's where the word fan comes from, it comes from sports. I don't really want to get into it because it's so separate from media fandom and from culture fandom.
It is a different.
It might
it's
have
a
like
different beast.
the root same impulses and same feelings, but yeah, sports are just different. They're a different beast.
And also people have written about sports, and I'm just like not the person to write about. I'm honestly not going to write that much about video games either, because again, this is my book. I don't know that much about that.
Exactly.
Have you seen? There's like this interview between Spike Lee and what's her name, Fran
Lebowitz?
Yes. And she's like, I don't like sports. I don't know how anybody likes sports. What's wrong with you? And Spike Lee is like, I'm mega fan. He's like, there's nothing like watching. And see, I don't know anything about sports, so I don't even know who his team is or what it. I just know it's from New York. And he's like, I love them. I'll go to everything. And blah, blah, blah. And she's like, yeah, I just don't. They're like literally fundamentally clashing because they cannot understand. And she's like a writer, and he's like also a writer, but he's like obsessed with sports. And I respect it. I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, my 3 male cis friends that I have, you have your sports and you have fun, and I understand it, but I genuinely can't get into it.
The joke is that I've gotten into Formula One recently.
But people are treating
cars, right?
People are treating those men like a boy band.
No, that's why I'm into it.
Exactly.
Wait,
exactly.
Wait, I need to turn my focus. What is this?
So Formula One is like fast cars, little boys in fast cars.
Yeah.
And the sport has been around for like 100 years, but the franchise was bought by an American conglomeration like 5 or 6 years ago, and they partnered with Netflix to create basically like a soap opera reality show about the boys in the cars.
Wait, that's why?
That's why.
Okay, what is it called?
Drive to Survive on Netflix.
That'll do
is
it
about
for the
the
girls.
ups and downs of the boys in the cars. And here's the great thing about Formula One. I have a lot of friends who are in hockey. I can never get into hockey. There's just too many boys. Formula One, only ever 20 at one time because there's
my
only 20
God.
cars on the grid and it's only 20 men racing against each other. And then, of course, the ones who aren't in this year who used to be in, and there's like the guys who are in charge of the teams. So it's a little more than 20.
Yeah.
But you only have to keep track of 20 guys and 10 teams.
Oh.
Okay, this is getting interesting.
And it is like a giant boy band because some of them, and also because you have to start driving from when you're like 5 years old, they all grew up together and they all trained together
gonna
and they
lose
all
it.
have rivalries.
I'm gonna lose it.
Wait, so this is a reality show?
It's a reality show about the sport.
Are they gonna make like a movie about this?
I mean,
Or,
there
like-
have been movies. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, they just did the Adam Driver Ferrari
That's
one.
true. I don't care about that though.
And then there's gonna be like an Apple TV one.
Okay,
They-
okay.
They are franchising this sport, and like the reason I got into this is because my friend from Terror Fandom started tweeting about the boys in the Drive to Survive show, and I needed something to watch while I was sewing. I always need something to watch while I'm sewing. So I'm like, I'll turn this on, and suddenly I'm like, oh my god, he switched this team. Oh my god, he's gonna lose the race. I'm like, why
We need to
am I
watch
suddenly?
this.
Yeah, you guys, if I can successfully get you guys into Formula One.
No, you're the second person because I have a friend who's posts about it on Instagram.
Who does she
as
post
if
about? Who does she post
as
about?
if it's like One Direction.
No, it is.
I don't
Oh
know.
my God.
I don't know who these people are, but she's posting about them all the time. Shout out Natalie if you're listening. She goes to school on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Literally, like I'm like, what is it? Like she literally she'll post about the Formula One boys and then literally post about Taylor Swift. It like as if it's the same thing.
I mean, and here's the thing. I enjoy Formula One. It's not like my top fandom. I have gotten people into it who are now way more into it than me, which is like a joyful thing.
I
I'm like,
love
I'm
when that
so happy
happens.
that I could introduce, like for me, like, you know, Terror and the polar exploration stuff is still my number one at the moment.
Yeah.
But with Formula One, it's like, first of all, I get the factor, the sports factor that is, here's something to do on a Sunday. We're all going to go to the bar and watch Formula One.
Right.
And that's nice. I have a group of friends in New York who all also like it, and it's something social. So that's the social aspect of fandom that is now like, that's the default for sports. Whereas with like media fandom, you kind of have to make that happen as an extra thing.
Yeah.
The sports, it's like, well, that's
what we're gonna do.
mainly what you do.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really interesting because, like, I have been percolating with the idea of having, like, Doctor Who watch parties. But me, I'm so, like, pissy that if anyone talks over
Yeah.
it, I'm like, shut the fuck up.
No.
Like, we have
Yeah,
to listen to
yeah.
what he just said.
But with a race that's like an hour and a half long, it's like you're gabbing.
Yes,
and then you look up
exactly.
and you're like, oh shit, when did he move
Right,
up?
right.
It's like it depends on people consume their fandoms differently.
Right.
Yes.
They have their own ways.
Like
It's
for me,
particular.
Formula One is very much like it's a nice thing to do. I have some guys that I like, and like it's a cool thing to just like, oh yeah, I know about that, and it's like it's a conversational topic. It's good for flirting with guys at parties, and like that sort of thing.
yeah.
Because sometimes they could be like, oh, you know, I'll be like, yeah, I do, but
Yeah.
not enough. You want to tell me more? And that always works.
I used to use that. I used to use Marvel and Star Trek like that.
I think
I'd be like, and be like, my dad loves Star Wars, but I don't really know that much about it. But like, I can't. One thing about me, every name of a planet or a character in Star Wars goes in one ear out the other as soon as the movie's over. Like I literally cannot remember one name other than Tatooine.
Can I think of a name other than Tatooine?
I don't know what the fuck's going on.
Oh, Samuel L. Jackson is Mason.
Mace Windu.
Mace Windu.
I said Mason.
And he has a purple lightsaber. I know
We
that.
all know Jar Jar Binks.
We
know
know Jar
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 Binks.
Binks. I know Luke Skywalker, Leia, and Han Solo.
What's the big
Chewbacca.
slug?
Oh, Jabba the Hutt.
Jabba the Hutt.
I know the big ones, but I don't know where they are. They're like, and it'll be on the screen. It'll be like 15.1 star
location?
forms, and then it's like, the sand castle.
But how many Doctor Who planets can you name?
I know, I can.
yeah.
They lock in.
Yeah, they lock in.
They lock in.
They really do.
Doctor Who, like
Doctor Who planets have good names.
Some things connect and some things don't.
like
What's the planet that the fucking Cybermen are from?
Oh, see, I don't know that because I haven't seen Classic Who.
Oh.
I have.
But they came back. It's not Skaro. That's the Daleks.
Yeah,
It's the Cybermen planet. I don't know.
Is it Cyber?
No.
And
There was
also, it's
another
so
one.
stupid that they're from a planet. It's like they're literally humans.
Look, in the 70s, anything went.
I know.
Yes.
Also, the Cybermen come back all the time in
They're
different
not.
forms.
That's the thing. They're not good.
I hate the
They're
Cybermen.
not really good. Like, I would think the Daleks are like, that's a good monster.
love the
There's
Daleks.
a squirmy little creature inside of a robot.
I
That's
lo-
really, the Cybermen, it's like, what are you doing?
And I just watched the Daleks' first episode. Okay,
wow.
I tried to get through Classic Who.
I have friends who are really into Classic Who. I'm like, God bless your soul.
I have to like. I have
Is it
to,
black and white? That's
Some
the
of it
one?
is.
The
Okay.
beginning is I have to watch specific doctors, like, because I tried. I'm the person that needs to see every single thing in order and know everything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is really trying me. I can't do this. I bought a BritBox subscription and I tried to do. They're like all the stories are like 6 hours. Like I'm like I can't. I'm sorry.
People's attention spans existed.
They
Yeah.
did because there was nothing else.
There's nothing else,
Yeah.
and also you had to watch it live.
You
like
had
that
to.
was there was nothing
You
else.
can't miss it.
I think about that all the time. I think about the fact that when Star Trek was airing, like there would be people who, first of all, they'd like film it with a 8mm camera, and they'd have like film. That's how a lot of the Lost Doctor Who episodes were taped with Star Wars and with Doctor Who. Like people would write down summaries of the episodes so that they could send them around. So if you miss an episode, you'd have to like write into a magazine and request like what you missed.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Star Trek.
That's so much.
Original Star Trek, even it came out like around the same time as Doctor Who. It's
Yep.
like the pacing is way better. I don't know what's going on with
Well,
England.
Americans.
I don't know what's going on with England, but it's slow.
Did you watch the TV movie they made for Doctor Who's 50th anniversary about the invention of Doctor Who, Adventure in Space and Time?
I don't
with
think
that was the
so.
first time David Bradley played the first Doctor, and it stars Sacha Dhawan as the first Doctor Who's first director. And then I forget the names of the people who played Verity Lambert and Sidney Newman, who are Doctor Who's creators. Both
I gotta
Jewish.
watch that.
And it's really good. And
I
then they
gotta
have
watch
Matt
that.
Smith appear at the end, and it's like I was like, it's so
God.
good.
See, I
I love a biopic.
I love a biopic too.
I do too.
And I just my problem with keeping up with the Doctor Who fandom is that so much of it, like, they only tell British people. And so I'm like, hey, you want to let me know that that's going on? Like, you have fans over here. Like, I don't know. Like, I still haven't watched every episode of Doctor Who Confidential. Give me that shit. I'll binge
It's
it.
all on, yeah. It's I don't know where they're hiding that
The
stuff.
drama
I
of
miss
global
Doctor Who
fandoms.
Confidential. That stuff used to come out for every episode.
That's real. The drama of global fandoms and having to keep up with the time zones and the time differences and the drops. Because I had bands who would release special songs in Australia. It was 5 Seconds of Summer, and not in America.
And Japan, and then be like, and then for this one, the Japan release.
Yeah.
only
Well,
Japan
like,
gets
give
it.
it to us all.
The history of Japanese releases is really interesting. Japan has a really fascinating and unique music culture, and the reason that a lot of stuff is Japan exclusive is because Japanese record labels will basically demand that bands provide additional content for the Japanese audiences because that's now an established tradition. So that's why there's a ton.
Interesting.
If you're signed to a label and they distribute to Japan, you have to cough up extra stuff
Oh.
to put on the Japanese releases.
I respect it, and honestly, probably the bands probably have like excess songs that they didn't want to put on the like actual album, and it's like an opportunity for everybody to have it. And also with the internet, we can get it anyway.
Now we can get it, and it's
we
really
can get
nice.
it easily anyway. And like,
but imagine like when I hear my dad talk about what it was like to be a music fan in the 70s.
Even you talking about writing into newspapers for summaries, I'm like, that's what they had to do? Like,
Or
that's...
they had to get someone to tell them about it.
It's like, honestly...
Imagine if you missed Amok Time. What would you do?
Like-
well, they'd be like, they were doing what? On television? No, you're lying. No, you can't be telling the truth. And you never get to
wouldn't-
see it.
No, I wouldn't be.
Oh my
no
God.
VHS. It's honestly making me have a lot of respect for the fangirls before
Yeah.
us because it's like, y'all, I think I'm dedicated, but now I'm like, I had easy access compared to y'all.
Right.
You guys were dedicated. You had to fly and drive and find it. And
the girls who invented fanvids by getting stuff from the literal cutting room floor of Star Trek and splicing it up by fucking hand.
That's
literally.
that is
Look up the history of vidding sometimes.
That's
It's
passion.
Insane.
oh my God,
That's-
is this the type of stuff that's going to be in your book?
I hope that I'm able to get to it because it's so interesting.
It genuinely is because I think I wrote on my notes, I said I'm interested on how fans pre-digital social media found each other and what their version of dashboards and Tumblr
Yeah,
were.
well,
And
I
it's-
mean, first of all, zines, mailing lists. There was something called a letter zine, which was literally just a printed mailed zine composed of letters from readers to each other. So there was no like fic or art or content. It was just the letters.
So that's literally like a message board.
Literally a analog message board. And learning about zine parties where, you know, a lot of times women would come to one of their houses and they would assemble zines by hand for hours to be able to send them
That's
out.
a bonding experience.
It
I mean, it's like
is.
literally like it's like a knitting circle, but like for, you know,
That's a whole
fanfic.
production. Like that is so much.
The physical domestic labor.
Yes, that's
that
so much
went into-
labor.
Yes, exactly, and it's so interesting. And so like, if you're interested in this stuff, there's like a ton of like Star Trek specific oral histories and a ton of like 60s and 70s stuff. I'm really interested in when I get to these chapters, which is still like 3 chapters away, the history of RPF. Like the first RPF fandoms came around in the 70s. I think.
And for people listening who don't know what RPF is, can you define it?
Real person fiction. So that's fiction about the actors instead of the characters they play.
Hey.
And so that began.
That's where I come in.
that begins in the 70s as well with actors from a show. I can't forget the show name now, but like it was hugely controversial then.
Wait, is it MASH?
No, it was. I want to say it was either. It might have been The Professionals.
Okay.
No, it wasn't. It was Starsky and Hutch.
Okay.
It was Starsky and Hutch, which is like just like a buddy cop show.
Yeah.
And they were shipping the actors, and
Oh.
people were like. Some people were like, ooh, and some people were like, what are you doing? The same way that they are now.
Sinners.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
In the immortal words of the bard William Shakespeare, RPF is fine.
This is a controversial topic.
Okay, it is, because now I want to say why I said this is where I come in. It's because my fan fiction, which I haven't talked about on the podcast, and even like say I won't talk about my version of fan fiction.
Yeah.
So this is a first time conversation.
Warming up.
It was One Direction.
Hell yeah.
Like I would do self inserts with One Direction, and I know I'm not the only one.
No.
Of course.
Like
not.
I used to
That
be
shit's movies now.
Yeah, exactly. It's literally Wattpad. It's Netflix movies. But I just feel like it was something so shameful, because where I was coming from, genuinely, I was 15 reading these fanfics as self-insert, and I was picturing myself with these boys who I loved as my boyfriends. And it made me feel nice and normal, because I didn't have any relationship in high school.
Yeah.
But I think that everybody has a reason for self-insert fan fiction, and it just gets toxic when you kind of force the whatever's in the fan fictions you're reading on the real person, because they're not, you don't know them.
Yeah.
They're still a character.
The fourth wall is a whole other conversation, but I do think that like the human urge to take someone that you don't know and rotate them in your mind is very natural.
Yeah.
Whether that's in a self-insert capacity or in a shipping capacity. It's because they are characters in your life that you don't know, that are presenting themselves to you, that can very easily take on a literary or fantastical aspect.
And you know how, okay, sorry, but that is also, like, this is another reason why growing up as a fangirl can kind of help you, not self-therapize, but like, kind of reflect.
Be self-aware.
Like, the way that I would imagine these people that I didn't know in my head, I have done to people I do know. Like, I've given a version of what I want a person to be in my head, and I have to step back and be like, they have not presented themselves this way to me. I am giving them way too much credit,
right?
Or less.
But that's like a very natural human instinct.
It is
to imagine.
It's very real.
Imagine the lives of other people.
Yeah.
And when it comes to like a celebrity or somebody that you know from a TV show or from a band, it's like that is a very natural sort of creative practice to engage in. Of course, like the fourth wall, that's a whole other conversation. But the reason I said William Shakespeare is because, like, of course, he was writing about historical people, and like there's that element of what I was called intertextuality, which is like taking things from different sources and incorporating them into your own work, and real life is just one of those sources.
Yeah. Honestly.
So, but when people started writing actor RPF for the first time in the 70s, it was fairly unprecedented, but also in many other ways, it's like, how the question is, how is that different from like celebrity gossip columns or like, that sort of thing. Of course it is different because you're imagining them sucking and fucking. But
but I mean, some celebrity gossip columns they're like, what are you doing with him?
Yeah.
Just
And
all
it's just
up into
the
it.
like
Are you dating? Have you broken up? Like that kind of slip into
the
it.
difference is that celebrity gossip columns purport to be real, whereas RPF knows that it's fictional.
Right, and so most of the time.
Well,
They're
and
both
then of
fictional.
course there's the slide into
The
tin
delusionals.
hatting, which is what we were talking about with the fourth wall.
Yeah.
With like the Larrys.
But like I really am interested in the history of that and like the history of tin hatting. And
Yeah.
as we all know, Omegaverse was invented by RPF shippers, and that is what that has given us in this world.
Okay.
Did you not know that?
No. Wait, speak
don't
more
think
about
so.
Omegaverse in general.
Okay, so Omegaverse, which as now in like a mainstream romance best-selling novel. Have you heard about that?
Okay.
The new Allie Hazelwood is a het Omegaverse romance. I have not read it. I don't know anything about it. I just know that it's that. And Omegaverse which if you don't know is a fanfiction trope where it's like dog sex. So there's heat and nodding and biting.
Like alphas and betas and omegas.
Well, that's, yes, but it starts with the dog sex. And you don't want to know why it starts with the dog sex? Because it comes from Supernatural RPF. And Supernatural RPF, back in the day, Supernatural was known as the fandom where RPF is the higher moral ground because, of course, your only other option was shipping fictional brothers. So it's like, were you going to ship the brothers or are you going to ship the actors?
My head is exploding, Allegra.
This
My
is
head
before
exploding.
Castiel was on the show.
Okay.
So there was a huge contingent of Supernatural RPF shippers who, like, it was an alternative to incest.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Omegaverse
They felt
was
better about
invented
themselves.
by J2, Jared Jensen, RPF shippers. And the prompt was like, in a world where there's alpha males and then there's omega males and they have dog sex. And that spread, this is in 2010, fairly recently.
Yeah.
That spread, and now it's on the fucking New York Times bestseller list. That trope.
I mean, I don't, no shade to anybody's preferences, but I don't like that. I mean, but I know the only way that I've experienced this, like, I'm glad that you just laid it out like that, and that I knew that that's what it was.
Yeah.
But the only way I've experienced it is when I'm looking for fics on AO3 and it's tagged Omegaverse, and so I'm like, I have to leave it out.
Basically, it's like, yeah, there's like, and this is this thing that I like to call movable fandom practices, where something will originate with a very specific origin in a very specific community, and then it will spread because people move from fandom to fandom, approaches and practices and tropes spread from fandom to fandom, and suddenly you get every single fandom having Omegaverse stories when it had a very specific origin. And like the thing that I compare that to, it's like, well, Omegaverse is one example of that. Another example is K-pop deco top loader cards, like the little plastic cards with the person inside it and all the little stickers. I don't know if you've seen those, but like they, you would get pictures of K-pop idols in the CDs, and then you'd need a little plastic holder to protect them, and then you'd start putting stickers on it.
Oh, yeah, I know.
But eventually, people started printing their own pictures of other non-K-pop celebrities so that they could put the stickers on.
Right.
So it's almost like a reversal. It's like you're not doing it because you get the cards when you buy a CD. You're doing it because you want the little cute card with the stickers with your guy inside.
Yeah.
And that's like a movable practice. Omegaverse is a movable practice because people are like, well, I see that they're doing that. I think it's hot, but I don't ship those guys. Let me take it and do it with my guys.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that is one of the things that digital and global fandom has given us is this movability of practices from space to space. I mean, even fan fiction itself is one of those practices because fan fiction as we know it comes from 60s and 70s media fandom, but then it started to be applied to bands. Yep. And then it started to be applied to sports.
To books.
And to books. And right. So and then AO3 is a sort of clearinghouse for all these different genres of a genre that was originally only applied to like television.
Yeah.
I want to know more about the difference between media and band fandom because I primarily took part in media fandom, rarely any band fandom, and Amber took part in primarily band fandom.
Can we, remember that question, but I feel like I need to ask this before we get to that.
Okay.
You're explaining tropes that I knew about but didn't know they had names for.
Yeah.
So now I just have a random question.
Yeah.
Is there a name for the trope where it's like you take One Direction, you take me and Harry, Lord Jesus, I literally can't. Okay, you take me and Harry and you, I'm gonna have a conniption fit, but like you put us on Neverland as Peter Pan and Wendy. Like is that, I would see those.
So sure, that's
alternate universe.
Let's conjoin those. That's a self-insert, self-shipping AU crossover.
Okay.
Crossover.
AU. I remember seeing AU : and then the thing. Okay.
It also could be considered a fusion because you're fusing One Direction and fusion and crossover is kind of like they're not interchangeable but they're related. So it's like let's say a crossover is generally when you have characters from one meet characters from the other in one of their worlds. Yeah. Like, if One Direction met Peter Pan, that's a crossover. Yes. But if One Direction is Peter Pan, that's a fusion. AU.
Oh goodness. I don't know.
I love reading coffee shop AUs.
Yeah.
Of Good Omens and R5 Means Death, but I also love reading modern AUs of Merlin, BBC Merlin.
Well, that's because that sort of is part of the show's canon, that a modern AU might be part of the canon.
Exactly. They might come back.
They might come back.
And self-insert AUs were like, self-insert with TV shows kind of started becoming a thing because the reason I'm saying Peter Pan is because I also read Once Upon a Time fiction,
Sure.
and there would be Peter Pan and self-insert fan fiction.
Right.
And so I think that's a little bit of a crossover of people starting to put themselves in the fanfic.
Well, that was one of the first tropes.
Oh, okay.
Self-inserts in Mary Sue's are very early. Like you see that. That's one of the things that people do on their own without knowing that there's a fandom out there is write themselves into the story. That's like one of these very like sort of natural, instinctive fandom actions that people might not even know that there's a context for until later in life.
Yeah, everybody daydreams.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Wait, what was the question that you asked earlier?
Yes. Okay. Now we get into
I've
this.
already forgot what it was.
It feels like now it's even more relevant because you have been mentioning all these different fusions and crossovers and that. I want you to talk more about the difference between media fandom and band fandom.
So, I mean, it's a really interesting question because they have different, like, I would say, like, societal origins. I like to think that they come from the same place emotionally, but they have different subcultural and societal origins, and it's only today with our modern, global digital fandom that you have people from these groups sort of merging and like swapping techniques and stuff like that. I mean, you could say that modern musical fandom, like the first example of that is like Listomania. When the women went crazy over Franz Liszt in the 1840s and they, tried to grab his clothes off of his body and stuff like that.
Oh my
He was
God.
one of the first. So there was in the 19th century, around the middle of the 19th century, this idea of the musical idol or the virtuoso began to emerge, and that was the first time. Like obviously, like Beethoven and Bach were famous, but like they're famous for their music.
Yeah.
And the virtuoso was famous for his playing, his or her playing, and his or her personality. It was the rise of celebrity culture, and this was sort of tied into that. So you had these early musical fandom moments. With Liszt and with Wagner as well, with opera singers and these musical celebrities, throughout the 19th and 20th century.
Yeah.
I would say that modern musical fandom as we know it began to peak through in like the post-war years with the Bobby Soxers and then the Elvis fans.
Right.
And then, of course, the Beatles took it mainstream.
Yeah.
And what band fandom was an incredibly physical and somatic fandom experience. It was all about screaming. It was all about physically being present. It was all about letting the music take over your body and letting your devotion sort of be, transmitted.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas I think that media fandom continued for a long time to be a very sort of private and personal thing.
Yeah.
And something that was like based in small groups and based in like conventions and like this much more subcultural sort of scheme.
Yeah.
Right? Like the science fiction fans of the 30s were like very, what's the word? Like cliquey. Like they kept to themselves. Like they were seen as a sort of like a cultural curiosity.
Yeah.
They were definitely subcultural. Whereas, the Beatles fans and music fans, Grateful Dead fans was another huge music fandom that very much impacted the way that music fandom was done after them. That's more of like, everybody knows someone who listens to these bands, right?
Yeah.
Because like the listening is more of like an accepted thing, but the personal devotion was very public. So you had a lot of people partook in that experience.
Yeah.
Much more so, like numerically, more people were screaming and crying at a Beatles concert than was at like freaking like the Sci-Fi World Con of 1964.
Right, because like I was saying earlier, you consume TV and movies kind of alone,
right?
Just naturally, and then you meet up to talk about it after. Or you go online to talk about it after. But music, you're at the concert with everyone as it's playing.
And I would say
releasing.
that music is also definitely a portion of the celebrity fandom pie. I would say it's related to film star fandom and not necessarily media fandom. It's like you're a fan of the characters and the stories, and to some extent the actors, but it's really like you are in the world of Star Trek. You were in the world of Sherlock Holmes or whatever.
Absolutely.
Whereas with music fandom, with the Beatles, just as with, Hollywood fandom of the early 20th century, like you were a fan of the celebrity and the, and the work that they produce, but really it's the parasocialness.
Yeah. Very much so.
Very much so.
That they really started capitalizing on parasocial.
I would say that that's the difference, actually.
Yeah.
Music fandom, like Hollywood film fandom, like that side of it, is mainly about the relationship that you have with the artist and with the celebrity. And whereas media fandom is the relationship that you have to the media, to the story.
Yeah.
And that has come together. You can't really separate that out today.
Yeah, I
the
think
same way.
I feel like people kind of got the marketing people clued in on the parasocialness of the bands.
Yeah.
Like I think One Direction, Justin
Yeah.
Bieber, they started to like be like, now what is this? That they started marketing the actors for their new projects more to be more like the boy next door and relatable.
But
like,
that started
in
with the
interviews.
Beatles, like, right? Like 2 years into Beatlemania, they came out with a movie where they played fictionalized versions of themselves.
Oh
Right?
my god!
And then they could, like, I mean, even Elvis was in movies.
Yeah.
So like it
Yeah.
is kind of inextricable, but at the same time, like, so when you think about the fact that the Beatles and Star Trek were happening in the same decade, it's really interesting because there were these two phenomena. Although the Beatles was global and ubiquitous in a way that Star Trek wasn't. Star Trek was cult. It was almost canceled. It was canceled.
It was canceled.
Like, but the impact that it had on popular culture is obviously hugely
Imprint.
outsized.
Yeah.
And it's still to this day,
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
growing and growing.
But we forget about these smaller shows that also like formed the bulwark of early media fandom, like Starsky and Hutch and The Professionals, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., like and Doctor Who.
I
Blake Seven.
I said on a recent podcast episode that, because like what you're talking about is like you will see more people screaming at the Beatles than you will like people losing it over Star Trek.
Yeah.
And like I hadn't realized that subconsciously over the last like decade or so of my fandom that like when I would talk about being a fangirl, like I would more readily like around just like the general public say that I was like a One Direction fan, and I would like not so much talk about Doctor Who because that's being a nerd.
Right.
And I don't want to be a nerd. I want to be cool.
Okay,
I would say-
I have the exact opposite though. Okay, can you please remember what you were going to say?
Yeah, I will.
Because I have the exact opposite because I hold back my One Direction thing and would want to tell people that I liked Marvel or Avatar: Last Airbender or something else because I was like, I'm a hysterical girl over some boys.
Yeah.
But with Marvel, I'm here for the story, and that's clear.
Yeah.
And that's different. I feel like it's like I would feel that way if I was at San Diego Comic-Con. I wouldn't talk about One Direction, but I would make known that my fandom cards are here because I like Doctor Who and I like Marvel and I like Star Trek and I know something about Star Wars. Versus like if I'm at a One Direction show, I'm not talking about Doctor Who, you know? Like and those are like the different splinters, because for me it all comes from the same place.
Yes.
Like it all comes from the same mania.
And you know that with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think that like historically and even contemporarily, music fandom is more normative than media fandom. Even to the extent that media fandom has been like normalized by Marvel and that sort of stuff, and like corporations now really want you to be a media fan in that way.
Yeah.
But music fandom is, I think, more parsable as something that people do.
Yeah, because it's also like you can listen to a song in 3 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like everybody listens to music.
Like everybody listens to music and everybody watches TV, but I think the idea of like, rocking out at a concert is more, you're like, oh yeah, like I
Accepted.
get more, it's like you get that versus like.
Also, not everybody watches TV. I've met a lot of people like, yeah, I don't really watch TV. I don't really go to the movie theater. And I'm like, I don't understand how you can live that life that way.
Yeah.
But there are people
Yeah.
that I feel like there are more people that would skip out on a TV show or a movie than music, because music is everywhere.
But and also like pop fandoms right now have so much more global reach and ubiquity than even the biggest media fandoms.
Yep.
I think like look at like K-pop, look at
Yeah.
Beyonce and stuff like that. Just fucking Taylor Swift. So like people I'm like, I'm studying fandom. They're like, oh, like Taylor Swift. I'm like, well, yeah, kind of, because you have to. But yeah, music fandom since Beatlemania, I think has been more normative and just bigger in general. I think that's because media fandom demands more of your attention and more of your mind. mind.
Yeah.
And to participate in something like media fandom and like science fiction fandom or even like literature fandom, like Jane Austen or Sherlock Holmes or like classic literature. It's like it takes a different kind of brain.
Yeah.
Maybe one that is a little bit rarer as far as these things go to connect so deeply with, one level abstracted from a real person on a stage.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, and obviously we all are involved in both, and like there's plenty of people that treat the person on stage like a story and want to read fan fiction about them. But again, that's a movable practice. Like that wasn't there at the start.
But with media, you have to like kind of know the lore of like how the universe around it to understand what the story is in general.
Right. Whereas I think with music fandom, like you can really just be in the moment. You can just be appreciating the star for their star qualities and for the music that they make and for how they make you feel.
Yeah,
much so.
What you're looking at, like literally physically what you're looking at in a TV show or movie is a character, and like you have to like go one step further to find out more about that actor versus like a pop star is singing to you supposedly their thoughts.
Yes.
Like it's their voice, their thoughts, their feelings.
Right. So that level of authenticity, that's a very powerful tool that a musician has.
Yeah.
For fandom to invoke fandom and to create their audience and to make that audience live. I mean, that's a huge part of Taylor Swift is how confessional she is and how personal her songs are.
It's like comedians.
Right.
Like comedians are getting up on stage saying
speaking
exactly what they
directly to
think.
you.
Like sometimes like people treat comedians like boy bands.
I mean, to me, The Lonely Island literally is a boy band.
No, they are a boy band.
And I made a TikTok today, and I said this. You'll find this interesting. I, as a person who's been in band fandoms and has been in media fandoms and like has worked in comedy, to me, the catnip for like something that I know that I will be into is if there are boys and they are in a band and they live in a house and they make silly videos with each other and their best friends.
That's the
like,
formula.
That's literally the formula.
That's the formula.
Like that's why I went crazy and was into Brockhampton for like 6 months. Like there was a reason. There was a reason, and that was the reason. And I keep getting TikToks for this band Laundry Day, and I used to listen to them like 5 years ago. And I remember like I'd be like, oh, like these songs are good. I don't know anything about them though. And now they're making hilarious TikToks, and I'm like, okay, I love them now. Tuned in.
Yeah. No, that's 100% the formula.
The Beatles would have made amazing TikToks.
They would have had such
They were
great
the
vlogs.
OGs.
Yeah.
They were so funny. Like they were natural comedians.
It's just the shenanigans. It's just who doesn't love a group of boys and their shenanigans.
And it's anyway.
Okay, I had a question. I wanted to know if there was like a deciding moment that you were like, now I have to write this book. Like I know because there are projects that we have where we're like stewing on it, and then something will happen. And we're like, we're making it now.
I would never have written a book if I wasn't reached out to by an editor who was like, "Do you want to write a book?" I mean, that's the never ever. I mean, it took me a year to write the proposal. Like it was a lot of work. I gave up on it like 4 times and had to get pep talked by my dad. I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. But I had an agent by that point, and I had an editor who was interested, who didn't even end up getting the book. We went with someone else because she was like, go with someone else. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So it's like, but there was an instigating moment where like I would never have thought to try to do this of my own volition.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I have, like, imposter syndrome up the wazoo. Like, what do I know?
Yeah.
Like, of course, like, I've lived this.
Quite a lot, I'll tell you.
Of course, like, I've studied this in grad school, and I've been doing fandom professionally since I was 15, but what do I know? And the answer is my agent was, like, very confident that I'd be able to get this book sold to a publisher, and I did. And so now I'm, like, trucking through it. And
this is very needed.
I hope that it is something that, at the end of the day, I just hope that it inspires people to like dig further and to like look into the history of like, 'cause any of these chapters that I'm writing could be an entire book of their own. It's like a very, very cursory overview, like out of necessity.
Yeah.
Some of this stuff has never been written about in a mainstream book before. It's only been talked about in like fandom, like obscure academia scholarship or like, like the primary sources that the fans themselves have written. So I just kind of want to bring this fan history out into the light.
Yeah. I mean, everybody wants to know their roots. Fangirls need to know their history.
Yeah. I mean, the fanboys, too. Like, it really is, like, a tale of two cities in a way where, like, I want to treat these cultures which tend to remain fairly disparate throughout history and give them, equal weight.
Yeah.
Have you found, like, where the origin, like, do you know what the origin of Fangirl is?
I believe it came about in I think Fanboy came about in the 80s. in comics fandom, and Fangirl was slightly later as like a feminist response to that. But fan itself dates back to like the 1880s.
That's really interesting.
I mean, before you had Fangirl, you had Matinee Girl, Bobby Soxer, Beatlemaniac. I mean, there were all these other words that were used to refer to the same thing.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Have you found like any interesting research about like queer fans or like non-white fans?
Yeah, I have. I haven't been able to. I'm just about to get to the chapter on early Hollywood, but there's a really interesting paper. I honestly haven't read it yet. I downloaded it and I was like, this looks so good, about female, like young adolescent girls scrapbooking female Hollywood stars and like and like sharing the scrapbooks with each other as like this sort of like queer female like communal fan engagement. I'm really excited to read that paper.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting stuff on like homoeroticism on the Victorian stage, and like I don't know, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Like what's tough about doing this kind of work is like you're relying on primary sources that were compiled by outsiders. Like it's hard to get into, like, unless you're going to spend years and years and years and years and years tracking down and reading like old diaries.
Yeah.
Which I don't have the money or time to do. It's hard to figure out like how the people who were watching and reading this media, like what they thought and how they felt.
Yeah.
So I'm relying on the work of like amazing scholars who've like done individual studies.
Yeah.
To sort of figure this stuff out. But yeah, it's like this thing called reception studies, which is like the study of how people like received the culture around them. And it's a hard sort of thing to do.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. So the more of that I find, like the better my book is going to be.
Yeah, because I mean, like, I am really interested in like the different ways that like white and black fans specifically in America acted, because a big like stigma against like being a fangirl or like being a fan with white people was that like it was seen as like being too black, or like being black, like celebrating in public and like showing your emotion to that level and like shooking and jiving like white fathers would not want their like white daughters to be doing this because that's how black people acted.
Do you have any resources
expressing
on that?
their
I would
joy.
Love to.
I'll look some up.
I mean, there have been references to that sort of like they're in the boys with their toy printing presses. They were forming these clubs, and there was a huge controversy in the 1880s when an African American boy who was like 18 or 19 was elected as like an officer of like this printing society. And the dudes from South Carolina were like, and these were all teenagers, and they were like litigating like antebellum racial issues in the pages of their amateur newspapers.
Whoa.
And eventually, like the guy, his name was Clark. He's like, fuck you guys. I'm 20 years old. I'm gonna go like work for like a real newspaper now. Like you guys can keep to your little hobby if you really don't want me here. And then that was shortly followed by controversy about whether women should be allowed to be in the amateur printing club.
Wow.
And it was very reminiscent of like fandom drama.
Yeah. I mean, like if you think about it, like expressing yourself to that level, like screaming and dancing and like literally just like physically expressing your bodily joy is like the antithesis of like white, rigid, structural culture.
Yes. It's not, there's I'm like learning so much about like etiquette and like proprietariness in Victorian, like Victorian morality basically, and the ways in which these ideas of like enthusiasm was associated with like hysteria and like like female nerve problems and like this like there was a big culture before about 1860 in America and in England as well, where like again audience reactions were huge and people would throw stuff at the stage and they would like scream and chant and stomp their feet, like audiences of every color, lower class audience and even middle and upper class audiences to an extent, audiences would be rowdy. And then as Victorian morality sort of descended, you had to sit there in silence in a theater. And so how was that energy then retransmitted and expressed through the culture? Right? Like it's called the silencing of the audience. It's a really, really interesting phenomenon. Not only were the audience silenced, but they were darkened. The lights went down in the auditorium. Before the auditorium had been lit up so people could see each other as the performance went on stage, because part of being in a theater was interacting with the other spectators.
Oh, wow.
Right? And that changed.
Whoa.
So.
Oh my God, I can't wait to read this book.
Very.
I don't know
Neither can I.
I don't know how much of this is gonna make it in.
Well, listen, I would like while you've been talking, I'm like, we need a documentary to come out after the book of like how you found all of these resources and like
Google Scholar, baby.
Yeah, like
Google Scholar.
I'm interested in the entire process and all the facts. Like this is amazing.
Writing a book is very hard.
Yeah, I
like,
can't imagine. I can't.
With like TikTok, people being like, okay, since the pandemic, people are like TikTokified and like audiences don't know how to have proper etiquette anymore, and like they're talking.
It's a
and
return.
stuff.
It's a return to ancestral audience practices of not giving a fuck. People would throw like
So
chairs.
interesting. Oh my god.
Like the riots were so common in theaters in New York and England that ladies were informed ahead of time of the nights that there would be riots, so they wouldn't be there, so that they would leave early, so that then the men could just like
Start throwing
shit.
Oh my
This is
goodness.
so okay, so there's definitely balance here, because obviously, like, don't be rude, but there's like a phenomenon now, honestly, with like within the comedy scene and like comedians who sometimes I feel like they feel entitled to be at like a higher status than the audience. I'm like, yes, of course, we treat you with respect, but also treat me with respect. You can't get up there and say anything. Like freedom of speech, but also freedom of me to react to you if I hate what you just said.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, audience practices are not fan practices, right? Not all audiences
Right.
are made up of fans.
Right,
and, like,
right.
you know, at a time when theater going was some of the only available entertainment to middle and lower class urban, like, people, like, obviously things were, like, a little different.
Yeah.
But it's all very enlightening because it sort of shows how the act of being in an audience at all has evolved as part of, like, you know, American identity. I'm like, I really should just be talking about America or just be talking about Britain, but I'm finding great sources from both places.
And they were always like going back and forth.
Yeah,
It's connected.
too,
It's all connected.
like-
I mean, back in the 1840s, all the actors were imported from England, just like they are now.
Oh my God. Our friend Rachel Pegram, who is a comedian, has this great joke about how all the British people are taking our jobs. And she's like, they got Martin Luther King, they got Harriet Tubman, and now they got Spider-Man.
But that's the thing, like, the actors have been British this whole time. I mean, like, with... or they were back in the 1840s.
I mean, they're being trained.
Yeah,
That's the
they
thing.
have-
Is like
they have
it's the
training.
practice of a British thespian to go to drama school, and we don't do that in America. Like a TikToker could become an actor. I'm not going to make a comment on that. It's a neutral statement, but it is what's happening.
You know, British actors are artisans, whereas American actors are, like, celebrities.
And politicians.
Yeah.
Okay, let me run through. I'm looking at my notes to see if we have any last things, because I know we're getting. I just wanted to say I listened to every single episode of David Tennant's podcast.
Oh my God.
And George Takei is on one of them,
Wow.
and he talked about how, like, the week after Star Trek premiered, I think this might be wrong. It was the original series. A group of women called him up and invited him to lunch just to ask him about his time on the show. And he was like, okay, I guess. And they bought him lunch, and he was like, I guess that was the first Star Trek convention. And it was like mostly just young women just wanted to get to know him.
Yeah.
And he was literally a nobody. He was
Yeah.
only Sulu at that
Yeah.
point.
I mean, this is something that you read about in, like, early chronicles of Star Trek fandom, and you're just like, what? It's like people, like, fans who lived in LA would call Leonard Nimoy and invite him to their house.
Yeah.
And he
I
would
wish we
sit
had
there
that
and while they
privilege.
put together zines.
Like just
because there was no rules. Like, they were inventing fandom.
what a firsthand experience. Yes, and that's another thing. You were mentioning something about like the fan status in the fandoms of, like, the fans who bring the gifts to the hotel rooms.
Yeah,
like,
for the Beatles. Yeah.
like speak more on that a little
Well,
bit.
it's just interesting because there are fans, you know, in music fandom and in, you know, other kinds of fandom. And I'm one of these fans. Like, I love organizing stuff. Like, I love...
You are one of the fans. That's what I was saying at the beginning. Like, you had Neil Gaiman singing your song.
I don't know.
You're speaking for the fans.
First of all, I have good luck. Second of all, I admit that, like, I'm prolific. I just do a lot of stuff, and some of it pops off.
Yeah.
And also, I do a lot of stuff that's not fic. Like, if you're, like, just a very prolific fic writer, you don't necessarily want to get that stuff noticed, right?
Exactly. That's
Like, but
your
I have
privacy.
always had, you know, and not necessarily particularly, I've always had, like, you know, a fairly selfish desire to, like, you know, meet my guys.
Yeah.
Like, I would love to meet my favorite guys.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, oh no, don't look at me. And I'm like, well, you can look at me.
Yeah.
So in a lot of fandoms I've been in, just by virtue of, like, being someone who's, like, willing to do the work to the exclusion of possibly work that I probably should be doing instead, just by my virtue of, like, willing to do the work, I have, you know, gotten into some really cool opportunities. So
Yeah.
I have gotten to Neil Gaiman sing my song, and like, I've gotten to work with some of my favorite bands just because like I'm just like let me at it. Let me at it.
Yeah.
Let me demonstrate my value to you as a fan, as a person who can liaise between you and other fans.
Exactly.
Like that is what I just wanted to do.
Yes, exactly. One Direction had the same thing with their update accounts. Like,
Right.
the girls were telling us when the concerts were, they would always upload the best photos, all the
Yeah.
musics, like all that stuff.
So, and that has been, since the Beatles. Like
Yep.
that has been, and like since these Star Trek people who would like, meet and befriend the actors, like that has been a position that is available if you are willing to put in the work. And also if you're willing to, it's kind of like, sometimes it can be lonely to be in like these sort of exalted positions where you're halfway between fan and collaborator with the artist. I definitely have experienced that sometimes.
You definitely have to speak with your chest on all occasions as the fan liaison.
I feel like that with this
Like,
podcast.
just-
I'm like,
yeah, kind of.
listen, guys, I don't know everything, but these are my opinions, and I think they're of value. And also, like, it gets weird when with the concept of fame
Yeah.
and like being known.
Yeah.
Because then like it's like the famous people who we all love, and then it's like the fan influencers.
Right. And like to be fair, like when I've done this, it's been in like smaller fandoms. So like I haven't really been dealing with fame except for like fame to a small group of people.
Yeah.
It's like definitely like, rising to the top of a very small pile sort of
Yeah.
thing. But I also I really enjoy like, putting stuff together for the benefit of a community, and like not only providing resource like to the celebrity or to like the band member or whatever, but providing value to the fans.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Being like you would like for the Terror, like I've organized this conference for the past couple years like because I really want to, and like that first year when we had the showrunner on and he showed us deleted scenes from a show that had only been on the air like 4 years before, and, like, that had been
That's
buried
so
by the
cool.
network, and like they never released a DVD, and like with deleted scenes, and like he was there on Zoom showing us the freaking deleted scenes.
Yeah.
Because I, spent hours putting together this
Like
virtual
you're
conference.
curating the
Right.
spaces.
Curating. It
Like,
all comes back to curating.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. Like, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
inspirational because I like really like just getting back into fandom and like understanding how important fandom is to me, but then understanding how important fandom is to everyone and like how kind of underestimated it gets in society. Like forming communities
It's a
and like
huge connection.
becoming a community organizer has been like a new passion of mine.
Yeah.
Like
It's
like when people are at our shows, like the first show we ever did was a One Direction drag show, and I kid you not, it was as if it was like an actual One Direction concert.
It was so fun.
And I was like, wait, I haven't even been to One Direction concert in how many, like 5
yeah.
5 years
I
at
think it
that
was 5
point.
years, yeah.
And everyone in there was a One Direction mega
7.
fan. I was like, I have not been in a room with other Directioners
Like this. Yeah.
in over 5 years.
It was a space of like, we all get it. We
Yeah.
are all
Get
here
it.
and we all
it's-
get it.
It can feel so good to be in a space with other people that get it in that way. Of course, it's good to be in a space with people who aren't fans, and so you can like
Introduce it.
introduce it, and like learn about whatever they're into. And it's like I will say that like it's important that you're not surrounded by other fans of your exact same thing all the time.
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
that's why
Yeah, it
that's why
is.
I'm glad that I took like 4 years off it to like be in the music world and to like be at college and to be a little bit more normal for like a couple of years, and like maybe I'll have a normie phase again. Who knows? But knowing that fandom connection is always going to be there for me, and like I'm always going to be able to like basically crank up the feel good machine if I
Yes.
want that hit of dopamine that I don't have to rely on an algorithm for. Like
No.
maybe it's not homegrown, but store bought is fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
going yes, I will be going to the concerts. I
Right.
go to Comic-Con every year honestly because I love it. Like I don't care about what exact panels are there. I just love being surrounded by
feels
that
so
many
good.
people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And just like surrounding yourself with that passion, and like it's passion is a renewable resource, right? Why not take advantage of that and like make your life better by surrounding yourself
Yeah,
with
it gives you a new
It's
lease on
not
life.
going to run out, and sometimes maybe you get tired of like your fandom, whatever. There'll be another one.
There will be
Honestly,
another one.
There's always another one.
Honestly,
Yes.
like you were saying, like I feel like everybody has the potential to tap into that joy that's unlocked. And I feel like my thesis on this podcast and with everything we're doing is that people who are fans and who are unabashedly passionate about things are better artists. Like that's my thesis.
You have to be crazy to be an artist. You have to be
Yeah.
insane. You have to be passionate. You have to be horny.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
that is where art comes from.
Yeah.
And like honestly, if like transformative fan works is your art, then God bless, at least you're making something and you're putting something new into this world.
Yeah.
Not, being a really true creative original artist. My God, that's rare and that's hard. But if you can access like the creative transformative spirit through the medium of fandom, you're still better off than someone who isn't making anything at all.
Yeah.
Right?
Because you're accessing that part of you. Like the creation of art is literally an act of like processing your human experience
Exactly.
for other people to say, hey, do you feel this way too?
Right,
Exactly.
Right. And
Exactly.
if sometimes like fandom is like really just like that ladder up there. And obviously we know like a lot of like fic writers and like fan artists like go on to create amazing original works, but even if they don't, that's fine.
Honestly.
You get to be lucky enough to enjoy the fruits of their labors within the context of fandom. And like I read fics that like they would be bestsellers.
Yeah.
But the author is like, no, thank you. I'm just here for fandom. And I'm like, well, thank God that I got to read this.
Yeah. And some have turned into Netflix movies by now.
Yeah. So
Bad ones.
Yeah.
That's the only opinion I'll say.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. I feel like. Do you have anything else you want to say, Amber?
The only question I didn't hit on here is there a fandom you're a part of that you would consider to be there from the very start? Or like pretty close to it.
That I was there from the time the fandom started?
Yeah.
Oh God, that's a great question. I don't think so. I feel like I'm always like a little. Because like here's the thing. It's like I usually like wait till someone I really like is
Tells
into
you about it.
something before
Yeah.
I jump on board.
Yeah. Although you did say you
I
watched the live stream.
I did. I watched the live stream of the first episode of Sherlock in 2010. Okay,
Yeah.
that's the answer.
Yes. That's
I was
special.
like, it was like middle of the day Chicago time. I was already a fan of Doctor Who.
She
I
was
like,
there.
Stephen Moffat has a new show, and all my friends on Tumblr are gonna watch it on this illegal live stream. I better watch it too. First episode of Sherlock, I was there.
That's
That's impressive.
Wear that on your sleeve. That's a badge of honor.
It was like July 12th, 2010 or something like that. I don't know if I got that right.
Yeah, like that's really cool because I feel like I didn't even get into Sherlock until 2011.
I wasn't in the fandom for like a while, but I was like a super Hulock girly.
Yeah.
So like, I was there from the start with Sherlock. Absolutely. That's my answer.
Mine, I feel like anything Disney Channel. Like
too.
honestly, like Hannah Montana, That's So Raven, High School Musical. Like I was there
I
from
watched
the very beginning.
I watched the first airing of High School Musical on New Year's Eve.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
At my parents'
Absolutely.
party. Yep.
That's our culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and immediately it was like a transformative experience, like watching High School Musical January 21st, 2006, and then watching Hannah Montana March 23rd, 2006. While I was watching it, I felt like it was changing my life.
Oh my
I was
God.
like, from the very first song, I was like, this is the start of something new.
Yeah.
Literally.
Like
This is the life.
This is something that will change my life and is changing me right now as I'm watching.
Oh my god.
So, like, I think those are the only ones I can claim to be there from the very beginning.
I think so too.
Because, like, watching Miley Cyrus on the Grammys, I felt like a grandmother. I felt like I was her grandmother.
Oh, honestly, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Disney too. The other thing, like, I would say Hunger Games because I was there for the midnight premiere, but I
There's
didn't
the
read those
books,
when they
yeah.
first came
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
And I didn't read Twilight when it first came out. I was like a bandwagoner. Like, I saw the movie and then read the books.
Yep, very much so. This has been
This has been
educational.
this has been such an illuminating conversation.
Sorry for all the academic words.
No, we brought you on for that.
Yes, we need to educate the girls
Because I feel like we just scream at each other
About
and we're
anything.
like, I saw this on Twitter the other day, and something seems wrong about this to me. And then you can like give like an
you
academic
come in with our
response.
sources. Yeah,
I hope I can. That's what I'm here for.
yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it. Well, plug your handles. Where can we
Sure.
find you?
Yes, tell us everything.
I am at Allegra Rosenberg. The at is the A because my name is too long. Allegra Rosenberg on Twitter /X. That's pretty much my only active public account. I do have fan accounts. It's probably not that hard to find them. I'm not going to say them on this podcast, but like I'm out there. You'll be able to tell it's me.
Understandable.
And what about your Substack?
Oh, yeah. My Substack, it's linked on my Twitter, but it's Tchotchke, the Yiddish word Tchotchke, TCHOTCHKE.substack.com. I might release, instead of like a essay this week, like a short story I've been working on, but we'll see.
Okay.
Ooh.
I mostly put up like, cultural commentary. And then like, on my website, there's like links to like my latest articles and stuff.
Nice. Well, please go find Allegra there and look out for her book in however many months,
2
years it
maybe.
takes.
We are so excited.
But we like just keep an eye on her because she is obviously smart and has a lot of things to say
Yes.
that we think all of you will be interested in.
Yes. Everybody learn about it.
Learn about it. All right. Well, Well, thank you so much, Allegra,
Thank you
for coming
guys so much.
on.
This was so much fun.
Yay!
Follow us at fangirl.central everywhere. We have
Yes.
Patreon, etc., etc.
My handle is Amber L. Miller.
My handle's Amanda Lane Miller, Lane Layne. And
And
as
always,
keep it chaotic.